evening. Plenty to look forward to in tonight's Fifth Gear. For starters, we'll be crashing this into this. And why we're going to do that? Well, I'll tell you in a few seconds.
Other delights tonight are touring car star and guest presenter Jason Plato, making mischief in the new Ferrari flagship, the 612 Scaglietti. While I'll be finding out what's fastest, Citroën C2 GT or Ford Sport Car. And you can win the winner in our latest Fifth Gear competition. But first, here's something to think about.
Over the years, crash testing has taken an astonishing variety of forms. Oof, I felt that. This next effort by Volvo is particularly inventive.
But until 7 years ago, most cars were only designed to cope with 30 miles an hour head-on into a concrete block. If the steering wheel didn't move too much, the car passed.
Today, crash testing laws are tougher, as are the cars, and the European crash testing outfit NCAP carries out even more challenging tests at an increased speed of 40 miles an hour, and sophisticated dummies measure the human damage in detail.
The better a car does, the more stars it gets, with the maximum being 5. And, as they say, safety saves lives. But it also sells cars.
So manufacturers have a big incentive to produce stronger, safer motors. Fine, good, great.
Well, it's fine, good, great if you've got a new car, but it might not be if you're in an older car, like these. The NCAP test started 7 years ago, but most of the cars on our roads are older than that. A squashy car from, say, 1995 hitting another squashy car at 30 miles an hour might result in survivable injuries for both drivers.
But what happens if that older car hits one of today's 5-star rock-solid cars? Well, we've decided to find out. One deserted crash test area, one old car, one new car. Join us later to see 2 family wagons crash head-on. The result may surprise you.
This is the Ferrari 612 Scaglietti. That's 6 litres, 12 cylinders, and a name that honours Ferrari's favourite coach builder. It costs £170,000, has got 540 horsepower, and will do a staggering 199 miles an hour.
It's the most expensive and most powerful new Ferrari you can buy today. But there's something about long bonnet Ferraris that means you just don't boast about the figures. They have a classier, more artful image. Sergio Scaglietti never designed with pen and paper. He preferred sculpting the metal by eye. And I think he'd be rather proud of the car that now bears his name, made in his old factory. The 612 is high-tech and hand-built. Despite being bigger than the 456 it replaces, the aluminium chassis and body means it's lighter. And if you're one of those super rich people interested in buying one,
Like Jamie Oliver.
then you can have a tour to see your car being made before it's shipped down the road to the Maranello factory for an engine, paint and interior.
And the interior, well, it really spoils you. You can even choose what shade of aluminium you have. And then there's the custom Bose stereo. Well, I have to say, it is fantastic. We've got 3 speakers in the front, 4 in the rear, a bass box in the passenger footwell, and would you believe it, a subwoofer on the parcel shelf. However, 170 grand, well, it doesn't get you everything. Sat-nav is an option, as is the Bluetooth connection for your hands-free mobile.
The 612 is Ferrari's only 4-seater, and your mates will easily fit in the deep bucket seats. The big boot will swallow the leather-bound toolkit, the optional 2.5 grand's worth of Pininfarina-designed luggage, or Tiff's golf clubs. Probably mine as well. So, is this a GT in the traditional sense? Something designed for the very grandest of touring?
Now, I've been very lucky in that I've managed to drive lots of Ferraris and owned one a few years ago. And experience tells me that they all do your head in after maybe an hour or 2 in the car. You've really got to be in the mood to drive one. This, however, is a completely different experience. It's very relaxing, it's very refined. One technology which adds to the overall driving pleasure is Ferrari's adaptive damping. Basically, the front wheel senses the bump and tells the rear wheels there's a bump coming. And that just makes the whole drive more relaxing, less clunky over these fairly large bumps we're going over now. You know, I can see myself doing 500-600 miles in this, maybe flying up the Autobahn to pick up one of the girlfriends.
But cruising might be only half the story. Because the engine is mounted so far back, most of the 612's weight is over the rear. A car with sporting pretensions.
Which means it's time to hit the sport button. Now what that does is it'll stiffen up the suspension a wee bit, it'll sharpen up the gear change, it'll also make the engine map slightly more aggressive for power delivery, but more importantly, it'll relax the traction control. Now I'm going to turn it completely off. However, if you're a football player or a TV chef, I suggest you leave that button on. When you start to let it off the leash, it's actually quite nimble. It doesn't really understeer, it's quite a neutral balance to the car. You can get the tail out if you want to be a bit saucy. But the best thing about any Ferrari is the engine. It's the heart of the car. It's a V12, it's super smooth, it's got bundles of power. Don't get much better than that.
The semi-automatic gearbox costs an extra £7,000, yet has been specified by 90% of the buyers. It's perfect for gentle cruising, but when you're getting after it, I just don't like them.
They're just not my cup of tea. It does exactly what it's meant to do. It's a very quick change, but it's just not as precise as I want it to be. Sometimes I might want a very quick gear change, sometimes I might want a slow gear change, depending on what sort of corner I'm in. And this just doesn't give me the control that I need.
But that's not enough to put me off the car. Just see it as an opportunity to save £7,000 and have a manual. Although, with an 18-month waiting list, you can't exactly rush out to the shops and get one tomorrow.
This is undoubtedly the Ferrari I want to spend most time with. It's so versatile. You can cruise by in a cocoon of luxury or grab it by the scruff of the neck and have some fun. But £170,000 is an awful lot of money. I'd love to own one, but I'd hate to pay for it.
After the break, which 10 grand sports hatch is fastest in our latest shootout? And the shocking reality of what happens when a new car hits an old one. Now for the bit of the show where we find out what's quickest, the fifth gear shootout. In our last series of shootouts, we saw BMW Z4 squeeze past Porsche's Boxster. Nissan's 350Z trounced Audi's most powerful TT. And proved that round our Anglesey circuit in Wales, the 3 Series CSL is a massive 2 seconds quicker than the standard M3. This week, we're looking at 2 10 grand sport hatches, pitching Citroen's new C2 GT, the fastest C2 yet with 110 horsepower and a manual gearbox, head-to-head with the only thing that comes close to it for the money, Ford's Sport Ka, the latest and fastest version of one of my favourite handling Super Minis. And there's an added twist to this week's challenge. You'll get the chance to win the car that's fastest. First up is the Ford, a car that's always cried out for a bit more power. Well, now with this sports car, it's finally got an extra 25 bhp. They've flared out its arches and given it lower tweaked suspension so it handles even better. It's got soft-ish brakes, which sometimes feel like they could be a bit sharper and yet do the job really well. It's got great steering feel and a lovely gearbox. With minimal body roll and surprisingly little understeer, the sport car is ready to set the pace. Keep it neat and tidy. The first bit at radar stops the clock at 25.1 seconds. The next bit at the hairpin is reaching 38.7. With a final lap time of 57 seconds. So, how will the new C2 GT compare with Ford's superb little sport car? For all the fuss that Citroën have been making about this being a rally homologation special and sticking a GT badge on the back, I have to say I'm a bit disappointed having stepped into the interior. The so-called sport seats are more like soft armchairs, and there's nothing that sporty about the feel of this chassis either. It's very soft with more roll than the Ford, and the gear change is definitely a lot looser. But one thing that isn't looser are the brakes. Whilst the Fords might have been a bit soft, the Citroëns are sharp, to say the least. In fact, it's very difficult to modulate to get that right bit of feel. And worst of all, if you brake too hard, the brake assist comes in and not only suddenly lurches the car to a much slower speed, but at the same time sticks the hazard lights on. But it does have an extra 15 horsepower, so will that be enough to overcome the nimble Ford? Only the time will tell. By radar, it's edged 0.3 of a second in front. And by the hairpin, it's stretched that to half a second. But there's still the high-speed left-right-left of Douglas Mountview to come. Steady. And while it doesn't gain any more time, it hangs on to pip the sports car and bathe in a moment of glory. Head-to-head, the Citroën C2 GT is the fastest.
We've decided to find out what happens when an old car meets a new car. We want to find out what a top 5-star safety rating means for the people in here.
And the people in here. It's a simple test. It's a fascinating test. But it's never been done for television before.
We've chosen Renault Espaces because the new one is the real school SWAT. Of all today's 5-star cars, NCAP rate the Espace as the safest. In fact, they say it's the safest car they've ever tested.
This typical 9-year-old Espace was a good performer in its day, and it's just the sort of thing you see full of families all the time. But exactly how much has the new car moved things on? Renault say it'll absorb 2.5 times the energy of the old car, whilst the body shell has been stiffened to help withstand high-speed crashes.
But if you're not careful, that extra rigidity can transmit increased forces to the next weakest link in the chain. The passengers. So it's vitally important to bring them to as graceful and as cushioned a halt as possible.
Whilst the old car only had 1 airbag, the new one has 8, with the front 2 deploying at varying pressures depending upon the severity of the impact and the weight of the passengers.
There are airbags running along both sides to protect the head, and in the first 2 rows there are airbags at chest level. Drive off without a seatbelt on.
And an annoying bong drives you mad, which scores big points with NCAP.
The cabin boasts even more clever features, like the seatbelt pre-tensioners. 5 milliseconds after a crash, they take up the slack to prevent this happening. Then there's the reinforced rear seats to keep luggage at bay, close contact head restraints all round, and proper 3-point seatbelts in the back. No nasty lap belts to chop you in half here. On paper, it's a state-of-the-art safety system, but how well will this goody two-shoes do in our real-world crash?
To find out, we've come to the Motor Industry Research Association's Havoc area, a secret test site in the middle of nowhere used by the military and government. It has £200,000 worth of electric drum winch, a beast that boasts the power of 200 car engines. When we press fire, a network of cables will pull the 2 cars into one another at 35 miles an hour, guided by a high-tension wire. We're lining them up for the collision the NCAP test is designed to replicate, driver's side to driver's side, just like a real-life head-on smash.
In the cabin are a right pair of dummies. Meet Tiffy and Vic, our stunt stand-ins. Worth £100,000 each, they're wired up to record the G-forces on every part of their bodies. Time to make your predictions and place your bets.
Do you still think they don't make them like they used to, and the new car will tear like tissue?
Or do you think the new car will demolish the old one?
Perhaps you're sceptical and think that the 5 stars are just a marketing ploy and both cars will perform similarly.
Well, don't blink and you won't miss it. To help make sense of the wreckage, we've recruited Crash Engineering Research Chief Richard Morris.
Now, Richard, I first have to say, I mean, this is your job, but to me, I'm always shocked by the amount of damage that's done. And this is just 2 cars at 35 miles an hour going head-to-head. I mean, this guy is just jammed in. There's no way we can get the door open or anything.
No, I don't think on this particular test that there'll be any reasons to get the driver out, because I think he would be dead. We've had a catastrophic failure of the occupant cabin. It's just total overload there, and again, the sill, another major structural part, and that's all just completely disintegrated. The area where his feet were is now roughly where the wheel is, so no, I don't think that would be survivable.
But the torso seems to have gone out of the seatbelt even. The seatbelt hasn't held him.
That's right, I think the seat has actually gone inboard, and that's why he's partly come out of the seatbelt.
And because the driver was lurching around, he wasn't in the airbag's line of fire, which meant it was rendered useless. So, a car that's only 9 years old and yet a lot of damage.
Indeed, yes, not
Whereas
good at
the
all.
newer model looks at first glances to have fared better. Let's see if we can open the door on this one. No, that's still not going to budge, but looking inside, the driver's feet are still on the pedals, there's no intrusion of the steering wheel, but the airbag hasn't gone off. Sure, that's wrong.
Well, it depends on how the car has determined the severity of the impact. If we look at the front of the car, if I move these parts off here, you can see that the main structure here is still fairly intact. We've had a little bit of deformation up here.
And that's a designed crumple zone.
It is, yes. You can see the features to allow it to crush there. So we believe that the car has decided that this was not a severe enough impact to fire the airbags.
This high-speed footage shows how the red car comes to a much more abrupt stop, with the black car's wheels rolling for longer, indicating a gentler deceleration. All the new Espace felt it had to do to protect its occupants was fire the seatbelt pre-tensioners, evidenced by the cracked plastic at the anchor point and mild chafing on the belt itself. Presumably this damage wouldn't have been as bad if this car had hit a car of similar age.
Yes, I believe that's true. This car has seen a lot of damage because it's hit a very, very stiff modern NCAP car. If it had hit a similar car to itself, there'd have been less damage, less injuries, and perhaps the driver would have survived.
So, I mean, it really is a classic double-edged sword.
Yes, I believe it is. And until we see more cars which are highly Euro NCAP star rated, then we'll see this problem as they hit the older cars.
Everybody in the new Espace would have walked away, as might, this time, the passengers in the old Espace. But the data shows their driver would have taken the brunt of the force, up to 84 G at the chest. That could mean massive internal hemorrhaging. The driver's legs would probably have been seriously fractured, with the thigh bones being pushed back through the buttocks. Blood loss would have been enormous, and with access to the lower legs being so restricted, the emergency services would have taken 30 to 40 minutes to extract him. Survival was highly unlikely, and remember, all this at just 35 miles an hour.
If that's got you concerned that you can't afford a safe car, then don't worry. A highly rated car in the right size for you may be cheaper than you think. 5-star cars start at around £5,500 for a second-hand Renault Laguna. And there's a whole host of cheaper 4-star cars that will stand a crash much better than that oh-so-tempting old banger you've got your eye on. The Euro NCAP website has all the ratings, and if you need any more motivation to go there, just remember this.
Tonight, we're quite literally taking fifth gear to new heights and celebrating the most spectacular challenge petrolheads have ever invented. We'll find out what happens when drivers and pilots try to settle their barroom boastings by racing cars against planes.
We've got the inside story on all the major races, and we've been behind the scenes for the ultimate head-to-head. Michael Schumacher versus Eurofighter. And as a spectacular finale, we've created our very own challenge. Can Tiff beat the most agile helicopter on Earth? First up though, here's Adrian.
I've come to Italy for the launch of the new Audi A6. Here it is, sitting by Lake Como. The old car never quite matched its executive rivals, the Mercedes E-Class and BMW 5 Series. To join the club, this new one needs to be bigger, more distinctive to look at, more agreeable to be in, and better to drive. So is it? Let's start with the first question.
Is it bigger? Well, yes, it is. Thanks very much for asking. Audi have made it 120 millimetres longer, which is about that much. So that means the people in the front get that much more room, and the people in the back get about that much more room. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's enough to make the A6 at last a truly spacious car, which is an essential quality for an executive motor. But the really interesting fact, and I can't believe I'm saying this, is the boot. It's 546 litres, which makes it bigger than the one on the BMW 5 Series and bigger than the one on the Mercedes E-Class. But, best of all, it's bigger than the one on the Audi A8. Now that is big.
The front end of the new A6 is more assertive and in your face. The new Audi corporate grille is huge, and the bonnet flows purposely forward, curving down around it. New creases along the flanks give the car a more sporting poise. It's not as avant-garde as a 5 Series or as posh as a Merc, but it's much more distinctive than it used to be.
In my mind, Audi have really come out of the shadows. This car says sporty. It comes across as affluent. It looks like an aspirational purchase. It ticks all of the boxes. But best of all, it looks aggressive. The age of the bland Audi saloon looks very much to be over. Audi are very used to having people battering it into them, but BMW makes sporty cars, they don't. So they're trying every trick in the book to prove otherwise. Now look at this cockpit. It's all angled and focused towards the driver. It says to everyone else in the car, this is the driver's gig, not yours. As with all Audis, it's beautifully finished and put together, but it's the little touches that make something like this. And it's the steering wheel that does it for me. It's the kind of steering wheel you grip and you think, this might have some fire in its belly.
Which brings us to the last question.
It feels so beefed up. The steering has weight, it has real purpose, and go round a bend and it feels tight. It really grips the road. There's no roll like the old A6. But the best bit is they've improved the ride. Not only have they improved it, but I think it's better than the ride on the E-Class and on the 5 Series.
Let's not get carried away here though. The BM is still more involving with sharper steering, but the Audi is now a serious contender, and it has the reassuring option of four-wheel drive. Engines will range from a 2.4-litre V6 to a 4.2-litre V8, with plenty of diesels when the car goes on sale in June.
Car ever be faster than an aircraft? And it's a question that people have been trying to answer for longer than you might think.
The very first challenge was in 1931, when Tazio Nuvolari raced a biplane over 5 laps of a Grand Prix circuit. Both averaged 100 miles an hour, with the plane just winning.
In 1981, Gilles Villeneuve settled the score. Before he took on an F-104 Starfighter over 1,500 metres, he removed the wing from his Formula One car to reduce drag. After wrestling the car off the line, good old Gilles trounced the jet.
All the recent straight-line fights, though, have been won by planes. A Portuguese F-16 Fighting Falcon beat a Ferrari F-50. A Jaguar GR3 fighter bomber beat a supercharged Jaguar XKR. And an F-16 Viper defeated a V10 Dodge Viper.
Then, of course, was the time we had a go. I was in a works-prepared Aston Martin DB7 and VBH was riding shotgun in a Jaguar T2B. Give it your best.
You've got no chance, boy. No chance. Okay, time to go, go, go!
The Aston's pulling away.
No, no, he's getting away from me. No!
20. 130. Easy peasy pudding and...
Be a sucker, eat my jet
With all of that, you'd have thought the book would have been closed. But inevitably, there was still the ultimate challenge to come. A fantasy shootout between the ultimate plane and the ultimate car. In the west of Tuscany, if you know where to look, you'll find quite a surprise. Because hidden amongst the cypress trees and sculpted hills is some barbed wire. The perimeter fence to the unlikely home of the Quarto Stormo, a fighter wing of the Italian Air Force. Welcome to Grosseto, no ordinary airbase.
The thing being guarded here above all else is the right to have fun. Impossibly stylish pilots aren't concerned with stealth planes or camouflage. They just paint their jets to look cool. They've even paid tribute to their favourite Ducati, the 999. They all fly under the sign of the Cavallino Rampante. The prancing horse was the symbol of Francesco Baracca, famous fighter ace and family friend of Mr. Enzo Ferrari. Today, the connection goes even further. Hidden in the hangars are two Ferrari trucks. They've brought along a Formula One car for a very special race.
Not averse to a bit of formation flying themselves, the Ferrari team take playing around very seriously indeed. The car they've brought along today has had a few hush-hush aerodynamic modifications. Power is a closely guarded secret, but rumours of 900 bhp and 230 miles an hour are flying around. You're looking at the very pinnacle of car technology, so what on earth can challenge it in a straight-line drag?
The Eurofighter Typhoon is one of the most complex aircraft ever built. It was developed at a cost of £51 billion. It can fly at twice the speed of sound. Pilots adore the agility. The Eurofighter adores a dogfight. Today's opponent is Red Baron Michael Schumacher, but does he really think he can out-accelerate a fighter jet?
I hope so. In charge of the Eurofighter will be Chief Combat Test Pilot Lieutenant Colonel Maurizio Caeli. Born in Modena, of course, he's a star of the Italian Air Force, able to fly 50 different types of plane and helicopter, and has logged more than 320 hours in space.
The challenge will be extremely high, but I know my horse in one sense, and I trust it.
It was to be the best of three. Two earlier runs had shown that over 600 metres the car was quickest, and over 1,200 metres the plane had the advantage. So, the grand final, the decider, would be a 900-metre sprint.
Michael will be pleased to know the Eurofighter isn't carrying any weapons. It still weighs 11 tons, though, and measures 16 metres long. The Ferrari weighs just 600 kilos and is 4.5 metres long. A 3-litre V12 built by Ferrari themselves against two turbofan engines made partly by Rolls-Royce.
Grosseto held its breath. At halfway, Michael was ahead, but then the afterburners on full reheat immediately took effect. The brand new Eurofighter project had chalked up its first kill. It took the Ferrari 13.2 seconds to cover the 900 metres, but the Jet was 0.2 quicker. Michael says the wet tarmac hampered his getaway, but he still managed to hit 190 miles an hour and was leading at 400 metres. But it wasn't enough to hold off the Eurofighter's 40,000 pounds of thrust. Slingshotting the plane past the car, Cayley says he glanced at the clocks and saw 298 miles an hour as he crossed the line. After the break, a TV first. I take on a helicopter in a Porsche, and Vicky selects the cream from the Geneva show.
Pretend, just for a few moments, that money's no object. Then pretend you've sent me to the Geneva Motor Show to top up your fantasy garage and discover the bits you never normally hear about. Geneva is the first European show of the year and known as the trendsetter, so we'll start with the cars that give a glimpse of the future. Even BMW GB didn't know the concept M5 was going to be unveiled. It has a 5-litre V10 and a 7-speed gearbox, but the thing that had a snooping stylist from Jaguar drooling was the cooling grid over the rear axle. Designers. The inside line on the Honda Sports concept is that it's going to be the new NSX. Designed by a 26-year-old, there's an incredibly light, mid-mounted V6 and an all-aluminium frame. But the key will be handling that doesn't bite. It'll be a supercar for beginners. The 100EX is Rolls-Royce's present to themselves, celebrating their 100th birthday. The bonnet is a work of art, milled from solid aluminium. "There's no way we could afford that," said one rival. Other expensive flourishes include the 9-litre V16 engine, the mahogany and the bleached teak decking. They could have made the soft top soundproof, but they didn't. As the designer said, there's something very romantic about hearing raindrops on the hood. Right, I found it, the concept car of the show. And in actual fact, it's the first concept car Land Rover have ever made. It's called the Range Stormer, and it is one mean mummy. Range Rover have really gone and slapped their ball joints on the table with the brashest car here. It's packed with luscious details. Things like a crushed ice effect for the lights, wing mirror cameras, gull wing doors, custom tire treads, a rear window cleaned by high-pressure air jets, and an interior to die for. My two favourite features are the fact that they've used light almost as a material and the way that things just seem to float. This dash is lovely. Now, apparently, Ronan Keating has already been on the phone wanting one, but I'm sorry, Ronan, no go. It's a concept only. However, Ronan, a watered-down version of this bad boy will go on sale next year, and with a rumoured supercharged V8. Woohoo! Now that the Panda is so good, we have to start taking small Fiats more seriously. And I just hope that they do make this, the Trepuno. It's like a modern-day Fiat 500, and it should make you feel like a 50s movie star. La Dolce Vita, baby. La Dolce Vita. Wouldn't you much rather have this than a smart car? It's so stylish. It's just over 3 meters long, but it feels massive inside, thanks to all the glass and light-coloured materials. The dashboard is a bit iPod-y. Simply stroke the buttons with your fingers to get what you want. And if, like me, you often need a bit more space in a car, then just deflate part of the dashboard on the passenger side. Makes me feel Alyssa. Now,
Now, this should definitely satisfy your need for speed. It is the Maserati MC12, yours for just a snippet under $500,000.
Maserati want to take this car GT racing and are having to build a few road versions first to comply with the rulebook. The big secret is that it's actually based on an Enzo Ferrari, but the MC12 is a little longer, a little wider, and at 205 miles an hour, a little slower. However, it's much more exclusive, with just 50 being made over the next 2 years. Surprisingly, quite a few Enzo customers are thinking of buying one. As I've always said, one supercar is never enough.
Welcome back to the world of cars versus aircraft. We've already seen the ultimate drag test between Michael Schumacher's Ferrari and the mighty Eurofighter. But what if you throw in a few twists and turns? What if you make it a test of high-speed agility? To find some answers, we've come to the Croft Racing Circuit in North Yorkshire, from where the Canadian Air Force flew Wellington and Lancaster bombers in raids on Germany during World War II. But today, my opposition will be the workhorse of every modern-day Air Force. We've swapped wings for blades because I'm going to race a helicopter. But not any helicopter. I'm going to race one of the fastest and most agile helicopters in the world. It weighs just 1,400 kilos. Its turbine revs to 25,000 RPM. It's got 500 horsepower. This is the 190-mile-an-hour Gazelle.
I am the lightning. I am the spark.
This Anglo-French project first flew over 30 years ago and has been used by the Army, the Navy and the Air Force, both for reconnaissance and as a tank-busting gunship. Available ex-military for about 200 grand. It's the ultimate track day machine for the skies.
To take up the challenge, I'll be driving Porsche's latest 911, which only has 381 horsepower, over 100 less than the Gazelle's, only revs to 8,200 RPM and weighs exactly the same. But as that little badge under the rear wing tells you, this is no ordinary 911.
It's the all-new track-honed GT3 with uprated brakes, stiffened suspension, titanium conrods, a close-ratio gearbox and more downforce. Add a roll cage, hip-hugging seats, and right here, right now, it's the ultimate track day car. But enough of the showboating. A quick lap time requires a different approach. To get the most out of a car on a track, you need to be as gentle with it as you can. Find that smooth racing line. And then be as progressive as possible with all the three major controls, whether it's the brakes, the steering, or the throttle. By contrast, the complexities of driving a helicopter would baffle the everyday motorist. Ex-RAF pilot Steve Unsworth will have to worry about altitude, airspeed, wind direction, rotor pitch, rotor revs, yaw, telegraph poles, and the simple fact that all helicopters are inherently unstable. If you released all the controls of a car, you'd simply coast to a halt. Release all of the controls in a helicopter for just 3 seconds, and you'd plummet into the ground. Just going in a straight line is a major test of skill, so flying around a circuit is going to be an amazing feat of aeronautical agility. After a brief warming of tyres and turbines, it was off to a rolling start. And the race is on. And he's getting away from me down to the first corner.
Corner coming up. rolling in, looking right. Applying the power, the wind's picking me up.
I need to be neat and tidy, trying to pull him back through this second corner Hawthorne. Don't get too sideways. But now I've got this chicane, I need to lift. And he's got ahead of me. But now he's into the wind. And we're reeling him in. 120, 125, we're back underneath him. Don't get too much oversteer, Tiff. Jim Clark, SC's a little left and right, but I need to lift. 110 miles an hour. Braking now for this double right-hander of Sonny.
Applying the power as we go round, skidding out, almost stopping as we turn into the wind.
On the dirt! Now he's into the wind. Just the complex to survive. I've lost him. Whoa! Nearly lost it there.
That's it, overcooked that one.
First gear, hope I've lost too much time.
Tight, hard left.
He's there. But he's got the wind behind him. He's catching. But... and we finished, and we... that was close. I nearly lost it on the last corner. But we did enough to beat the helicopter. In tonight's Fifth Gear, Tom drives the new Aston Martin DB9, and Vicky drives a Golf that will be certain to fail a drugs test. But first, driving. It'll come as no surprise to you that I love it. I seem to have to wait a lifetime for my 17th birthday, and once I'd got the steering wheel in my hands, the sheer sense of freedom and exhilaration was here to stay.
No doubt most of you Fifth Gear viewers feel exactly the same as me. Yet for some, the mere idea of getting behind the steering wheel brings them out in a cold sweat.
When you stop and think about it, it's easy to imagine why people are frightened. Driving is one of the most dangerous things we do. We all know what might happen if we miscalculate by just a few inches. We can all imagine what happens if something much bigger than us doesn't see us. And every day we put our lives in the hands of drivers around us. Most people just don't think about what might happen, but for some the fear is paralysing.
Everything comes rushing in, fear beyond belief, feeling out of control. Heart suddenly starts pounding, breath short, stop almost breathing, but weirder than that is you have this bizarre feeling that the wheel's just going to go straight into the other traffic. You're going to kill yourself.
The thought of driving on a motorway was just pure abject terror. I would have nightmares the night before embarking on a journey. I couldn't go into the outside lane because I felt that the barrier was drawing me towards it.
Ironically, it does seem to be that motorways, statistically our safest roads, spark the most driving phobias. This is Julia. She passed her driving test over 20 years ago and ever since has been frightened of driving on motorways. Her regular journey to work should involve the M25, but each time she goes on it, the anxiety takes over and the stress levels mount.
Can't see. Oh no, they're all there. Oh my God, look at the big lorry coming along. How am I going to get on? It's not going to let me out. I'm going to have, oh my word. No, it's just pulled out. Oh, excuse my French. Oh, flipping hell.
Julia's reaction is quite typical amongst driving phobics. The fear about a situation turns into paranoia and then surfaces as anger.
Okay. Oh, look, the way they're going, they're just moving around, all inside the lanes. It's just mad.
And as well as getting angry, phobics tend to slow down, making the whole situation even worse.
You got my... What's it? Oh, off you! How does he think he is? Look at the way he's wobbling in and out. Oh, he's wobbling. Look, he's coming over here.
So what can be done? Is there a cure for scared drivers? Join us later when we try and convince Julia that she really can live life in the fast lane.
Oh, my head hurts.
New Aston Martins don't come along every day, so when they do, they need to be able to stun like a ray gun, and for more than just a few years. They need to make their owners feel like the stars of the show, not just the extras.
And the first of the really modern Astons did just that. If you've ever seen a Vanquish... Oh, no, wrong voice. If you've ever seen a Vanquish on the road, it makes even the spoddiest bonehead look like a truly sexy hero type.
But a Vanquish costs £160,000. Aston desperately needed a car to replace their aged but big-selling DB7. A car about 100 grand to compete with Ferrari's 360 Modena and Lamborghini's Gallardo. This DB9 is it.
Immediately, every fibre of this car screams Aston Martin at you. If you didn't notice those slimmer hips and fuller waist, you might almost mistake it for its bigger Vanquish brother. For starters, there's the big, bluff, sharky mouth. Then there's the slightly more swept back headlights. And who could forget the trademark side vents and familiar hard shoulder line across the top of the rear arch? It's all pure Vanquish inspired. Even underneath its skin, it's the same type of high-tech bonded and riveted aluminium monocoque as the Vank.
And what about this interior? Well, old Aston Martins got slated for having old Ford bits in them, and quite rightly so. But the interior of this new DB9 is all bespoke, and I do mean all.
It's dominated by this beautifully crafted centre console, which manages to be both traditional English and high-tech minimalist. And there's a 950-watt Lin stereo, and sat-nav to boot. Straight ahead, there are the dials, stunning metallic jewels, which greet you. Unfortunately, the rear seats are nothing short of a joke. But who cares when you've got detailing like this? This is stuff you really want to show off to your friends.
Even the starter button is made of pure crystal.
Of course, the DB9 is not about figures, it's about emotions. But my emotions are stirred quite significantly by its 6-litre V12 with 450 brake horsepower, and a fatter torque curve than the Vanquish. 5.1 seconds to 62 and 186 miles an hour top end. That's stirring me.
That engine is a wailing, singing monster of a thing. It makes me want to record it and play it back over and over again as I sleep. Oh, just listen to that!
Now, later in the year, the DB9 will be available with a normal manual gearbox, so it'll have a gear stick. But this one's got an automatic 6-speed with paddle override, which means that it goes up with the right and down with the left. It suits the car perfectly,
means that you get all the benefits of an automatic, but you get to have a play when you want to. Now, the good thing about this gearbox is that when you don't want to play, you just press D, and it becomes a normal, solid 6-speed automatic. And it matches the characteristic of the DB9 that's also utterly impressed me, and that's the ride. It's got no fancy schmancy electronic nonsense in this car, just properly set up wishbones and springs done by people who obviously know what they're doing. It actually betters some of the luxury saloons that I've been driving recently, and it's the best GT I think I've ever driven.
Yes, OK, there is a feeling of weight against the nose if you get a bit too keen. But the levels of grip and go and steering feel and braking power are phenomenal for this kind of car. It's the opera singer that can dance, the footballer that can play chess. It's the F1 driver who can hold a conversation. At 103,000, why bother with a Vanquish when this costs 60 grand less? I reckon it'll steal sales from other GTs like the Bentley Continental, as well as the Gallardo and 360.
Quite frankly, this DB9 is an absolutely stunning car. I actually reckon that it's the best car that Aston Martin have ever built. It's that good. And for me, being a little bit of a junior James Bond, it makes me very happy indeed.
After the break, Tiff teaches our scared driver a lesson. And I race a diesel Golf against a Honda NSX. No, honestly.
Welcome back to our investigation into the world of scared drivers. Earlier on, we met Julia, who has a phobia of driving on motorways.
Oh, now I'm stuck in the middle lane, all on my own.
We've invited along car psychologist Conrad King to see if he can cure her fear. The first thing that's obvious is that driving itself isn't her problem.
You're a very good driver. I don't like to boost your morale too much, but I mean, you're driving, braking, accelerating, using the gearbox very smoothly, and you steer well, so you've got no problems with normal driving at all.
Not at all. As I say, I'm quite happy I drive into London in the rush hour. It doesn't bother me at all.
So, why a fear of motorways? Well, most driving phobias have roots in specific incidents that happened in the driver's past, and this seems to be true for Julia.
I know I had a battered old Hillman Imp, and I remember once driving along the North Circular and it sort of gave out in the fast lane and just stopped, which was a bit scary.
So did you literally stop in the
it
outside
stopped.
lane?
It just lost power.
That could give anyone a problem.
And it just
it?
like,
Go on,
and it just stopped with all these cars going behind you.
Were you scared?
Well, yeah, because I'd only just passed my test, so I really didn't know.
How old were you?
I was probably 18.
Is it me, or is that like a really good thing to set you up for a phobia?
Identifying what it is that's caused the phobia is frankly half the problem. Then it's a matter of coming up with methods of minimising the fears. In Julia's case, she needs to know her car won't let her down.
Start building a routine. If you know you're going to drive on the motorway,
yeah,
and part of that routine is that you know your car is reliable.
Yeah.
You know, can we check the tyre pressures? I just want to make sure before we go on the motorway. And what you're doing is you're building up a routine to make sure everything you can do is making yourself safe. If you do that, it will just take a little bit of the anxiety away.
On the dual carriageway, everything changed. Julia tensed up and gripped the steering wheel hard, paranoid about getting boxed in and worried that some incident would happen in the traffic around her. The solution was to get her to be less irrational about driving by showing that most traffic situations are largely predictable, with other drivers intent on their own journey rather than threatening hers. Crucially, she should create her own personal space by backing off from the car or missile launcher in front. The other great fear motorway phobics have is speed itself.
Jesus. Oh my word, there's some power in this.
After a quick blast around the Rockingham Oval, I levelled out at the motorway speed limit.
How fast are we going?
Oh, 70, of course.
Feels like you're doing about 30.
For the first time in her life, 70 miles an hour wasn't making Julia scared.
One of the things that Julia said is creates anxiety when she's on the motorway is this kind of everything's going so fast. So what we did on the track was that, you know, we got her at 70 miles an hour and we showed her that in a modern, well-maintained car, 70 miles an hour is actually a very manageable and controllable speed.
And even when you make sudden lane changes or brake in an emergency, you don't necessarily lose control.
But nothing happened. We're still doing 70 and we can change lanes.
Oh my God!
We're not saying she should be reckless on the motorway. What we're saying is that she can enjoy the whole process of driving and motorway driving, and that it's not all kind of like, oh, misery and therapy and you can't do this and you can't do that. You know, it can be fun. We pay enough money for motoring, so, you know, she should enjoy it.
But you can actually do it with your eyes shut and your hands off the wheel. Do you know that?
No,
80 miles an hour. You can just, oh no! You said it, and it stopped. And it still stops. You see?
So, after 2 days of intensive work, it's almost time for Julia to head back out onto the motorway alone. Can she do it? Stay tuned to find out.
Now here's another chance for you to win a fifth gear car. As you can see, it is a 5-door silver M-Reg Golf, automatic and diesel. So it doesn't seem much of a prize, but in a few minutes it will be fitted with a nitrous oxide kit, when hopefully it will be as fast as this Honda NSX. Nitrous oxide, or laughing gas, began commercial life as an anaesthetic, but in the Second World War the Luftwaffe used it to boost the performance of their fighters at high altitude. By the 1970s, it was being widely used in drag racing, and it's been transforming engines ever since. So, how does nitrous oxide work? Well, most things need oxygen to burn, like this candle, which is happily using the oxygen in the air. Now, nitrous oxide has more oxygen in it than air, and when it's exposed to a higher temperature, the bang is bigger. Supplement the air and fuel in your engine with nitrous oxide and, well, you get the idea. To fit a nitrous oxide kit to our Golf, we've enlisted the help of specialists, the Wizards of Noz. To start with, a large tank of liquid nitrous oxide is strapped in the boot. This feeds a pair of snazzy-looking solenoids under the bonnet, which shoot short, sharp blasts of nitrous through some tubes into the cylinders. We're hoping all this will double the power output of the car. And why a diesel automatic? Well, diesel engines are inherently stronger and there's no clutch to burn out. Plus, of course, there's the surprise element for other drivers. Nitrous conversions start from £600, though our kit cost £1,000. Refills are around £18 a tank, though how many of those you need depends on how often you succumb to temptation. Contrary to popular belief, nitrous oxide is legal on the road. Insurance companies recognise it, and although they will charge you more, it can be as little as £40 extra. Now then, the Golf is just about ready, and so am I. And to show just how fast our modded Golf is, we're going to do a couple of tests. First up, I'm going to try and overtake this lorry, which is travelling at 40 miles an hour. This coned-off box represents a safe gap between oncoming vehicles. Just because you fit nitrous oxide to your car, it doesn't mean to say you have to use it all the time. So, to establish a benchmark, on this first run, I'm going to see how the 1.9-litre diesel engine fares without any chemical enhancements. So, I'm happily trundling along behind this lorry at about 40 miles an hour, waiting for a place to overtake it. I see my opportunity, pull out, accelerate, kicks down a bit, the automatic gearbox, but there's absolutely no way I'm going to make it in the time that I have been given. What I need is a lot more power. Right, time to see how we get on with a bit of nitrous oxide. Now, even though this switch is flicked on, the nitrous doesn't come on until I floor the throttle. It cuts out again when I lift off. So, same old scenario, behind the lorry at 40 miles an hour, waiting for my opportunity to pass. I spy an opportunity to pass. So, pull out, floor the throttle, zoomy zoom, zoom, zoom. That is brilliant. Do you know what? That really is actually quite brilliant. So there is a definite power advantage with the nitrous oxide switched on. But just how fast can we go? Well, it's time for a race. Confident as ever, we're pitting our modded Golf against the 280 bhp Honda NSX supercar.
And to make things as difficult as possible for me, we've put Mr. Tiff Needell in the Honda's hot seat.
Flat out. Come on.
Blimey, she's staying with me.
No, I've got the nose on Tiff, which I'm terribly chuffed about. I'm going to get you needles.
No way.
Oh, I think he's got the legs on me, though. He has, he's pulled away.
What's that? VTEC chimes in. It's Papa Vince.
He's away. But that is not a bad effort from my little Golf.
Well, we were obviously being a tad optimistic, but you've got to admit that to modify a 1.9 diesel automatic Golf so that it can get even this close to a bona fide supercar is no mean feat.
Right, back to our scared driver, Julia.
Here we go. Oh my God. Oh no.
D-Day has arrived. After 2 days with a psychologist, she's about to embark on the motorway journey that has always filled her with terror.
We all know you're a good driver. I know you're a good driver. Tiff does, you do. You just have to remember some things to help yourself stay relaxed. It's really simple. First of all, space. Give yourself loads of space when you're on the road. Gives you lots of time to react. And hands. If you are getting a bit tense or a bit anxious, just relax your hands on the wheel, relax your shoulders. We're going to be behind you in a big shiny Volvo. We know you can do it, you know you can do it, so it's time to get on and prove it to everyone.
Okay.
More than anything, Julia hates trying to join a motorway, so this is where it's most likely to go wrong.
Well, she's certainly a lot less stressed than she was yesterday, and that's, you know, she was worried before getting on.
Hands and space.
Are you confident now?
I am confident. I think she's really relaxed. She's in a difficult position there. She's been cut up. It's the worst possible entry onto the motorway that she could have had, and she's great. That would have destroyed her yesterday.
There's even a big lorry. But I'm not frightened of you, big lorry. Because I've got space.
She's joined the motorway with complete confidence, and after that, it just gets better and better.
Oh, he's trying to nick my space. Okay, we'll drop down again. And we'll let me have my space, because it's my space and I am going to have it. And my hands are fine, even though Big Lorry is about to wobble the car. But I don't care, because I'm chilled.
Right, we need to get into the outside lane, because otherwise we'll be here forever.
Outside lane. Right, okay. And I'm in the fast lane. Oh, how exciting!
No, she's enjoying herself.
Onto the services for a nice cup of tea.
Whoa, what was the problem there?
Brilliant!
That was fine, wasn't it?
What was all the fuss about?
I don't know, really. It was okay.
You dealt with all the lanes, you dealt with all the lorries.
Yeah.
There was a distinct lack of swearing.
Yeah, I didn't swear.
What does she do now to keep it up?
Right, all you have to do now is practice.
Right.
That's all you need to do. Go out a couple of times a week for the next few weeks,
Yeah.
and you'll never be that anxious again.
Okay.
So thank you, Conrad.
Yeah, thank you, both.
Julia, congratulations. You're on your own. You can find your own way home, can't you? See you. Bye.
See you later.
So, there you are. Most driving phobias can be sorted relatively easily. And if you want more information on the subject, then visit our website. After all, nobody should be denied one of life's greatest pleasures, driving. See you next week.
In tonight's Fifth Gear, I'm enjoying myself in the rather unusual new Gibbs Aquada. And Tom asks whether the new Mercedes SLK is, at last, a more rewarding experience. And if you weren't into rubber before, then you ought to start now. Look at this.
You're about to see what happens when a tyre blows at 120 miles an hour. You ignore your tyres at your peril. It's reckoned that in Britain alone, rapid deflations or blowouts cause 200 deaths a year.
Interest in the black bouncy stuff has spiced up no end recently, mostly because of the looming threat of litigation.
In the Firestone Ford saga in the USA, the treads on Explorer 4x4s separated from their tyres, causing a sudden loss of control. The result is new legislation called the Tread Law. It's now compulsory for all new cars over there to have devices warning of low tyre pressures, either as a readout or a warning light.
While there are no signs of any such legislation over here, more and more manufacturers are offering run-flat tyres. Not just for safety reasons, but also to remove the need to carry a spare, thereby saving both space and weight. But exactly how do they work? And more importantly, are they up to the job? Join us later for the ultimate run-flat test, when we puncture them and then test them on the track at speeds of up to 100 miles an hour. Plus, we show just how alarming a blowout on ordinary tyres can be.
This is the new Mercedes SLK. Its big F1-style nose reminds you of Merck's new McLaren SLR supercar, and it's much more macho, sexy and low-slung than the old model. It's on sale this summer at prices from around £27,000 to 35 grand, and on appearances alone it promises to be a really great car. So is it?
Well, just like the old SLK, the new one has an astonishingly clever roof. Now, I know that Renault and Peugeot both have super trick roof systems these days, but let's remind ourselves just how brilliant this one is. With just one press of this little button here, we convert from coupe to convertible in just 22 seconds. That's even quicker than the old car.
And the best bit is, you don't even need to be in the car to do it.
Nobody does the coupe to convertible transformation better than this. The new SLK folds the rear glass away more tidily, leaving more boot space. Room for another golf bag, as long as it hasn't got any golf clubs in it.
Inside we have revealed a rather dashing new interior. Now immediately you sort of figure out that it's bigger than the old one, and it just feels more roomy as you jump in. Lots of silvery bits. Well, every lorry driver's going to be having a good look at them as he drives past this summer in his crew cab. But I quite like these little dials here, which look like they're canted towards you, even though they're not. I can't help thinking that when you try and get your can out of there at 50 miles an hour, you're going to be spilling it all over the expensive electronics. But the best thing about this car are these seats. Very thin, magnesium framed. You slide into them and immediately it feels like you're at home. It's like old Porsche 911s used to be. And also, if you check this out, this little vent here blows hot air onto the back of your neck when you're going fast. Mercedes calls it air scarf. I just kind of like the way it feels. Where the old SLK really fell short of its Porsche and BMW rivals was in the driving part of being a sports car. I mean, it was fine in 1996 when it was launched, but nowadays it just feels like it's got a lumpy ride, it's not fast enough, the steering's too slow. And it's enough to put me off recommending it to anybody. The thing is, this car is a complete revelation. It goes better, stops better, it actually feels like a sports car, like someone at Mercedes actually took a Boxster home for the weekend and figured out what made it good.
There are engines to suit all tastes, from a 2-litre supercharged 4-pot through to a 360 brake horsepower AMG later in the year. This is the 3.5-litre SLK 350. It's not quite as zingly and top-endy as a BMW 6, but it's still very good. And there's a new 7 speed auto.
It might now be much more of a sports car, but like all modern Mercedes, you can't actually switch the traction control completely off. But that's going to bother people like Tiff enormously. But for those of us that aren't Le Mans drivers, it's actually probably a lot safer. You know, I could have been a racing driver if I'd have had the chance and some ability. The whole thing is much more fun now. If the last 10% of driving pleasure isn't your thing, then you no longer need a Porsche Boxster to get that thrill. You don't even need a BMW Z4. What you do need is a new SLK. It's much easier to live with, it's got the coupe and the convertible, and it's no longer a disappointment when it comes to the drive.
Most of us don't pay much attention to tyres, but tonight we've got blowouts in close-up. This terrifying 120-mile-an-hour blowout spun a police car 3 times across 3 lanes of traffic. Miraculously, no one was hurt. But what causes a tyre to suddenly peel itself off its wheel?
Usually blowouts build up to the big bang over a period of weeks, sometimes even months. A little nail gets stuck in your tread and slowly works its way through your tyre. The deflation is gradual and most people won't even notice the difference.
But an underinflated tyre will heat up due to the friction caused by the sidewall flexing, and when it overheats, it's likely to suddenly let go of the rim, something we've simulated here with an explosive charge.
I turned in at 60 miles an hour and experienced a total loss of steering and was glad there was no oncoming traffic to plough into. When a rear tyre blows, the result is even more dramatic. I was surprised by the immediate loss of control. The spin was irretrievable.
Nails aren't the only cause of blowouts. Old tyres can decompose and cause equal havoc. If your tyre looks like this, crazed or covered with spidery cracks, it could be past it, so get it inspected. Tyres baking in the sunlight on the backs of 4x4s are particularly prone to premature ageing.
So you think all we need is a simple use-by date stamped into the sidewall. But unfortunately, the industry doesn't seem able to agree on what a safe period actually is. So for the time being, we just have to do without.
There are tyres, though, that supposedly make blowouts a thing of the past. In a moment, after Vicky's had her wicked way, I'll be testing some so-called run-flat tyres at speed. With £12,000 to spend on a hatchback, you could either go for a Mini Cooper or a Skoda Fabia diesel. One, the obvious choice for the enthusiast. The other, surely, for the economist. But look at the figures more closely and you might be surprised. Yes, the Mini does get from 0 to 60 quicker, but it's got less than half the torque of the VRS Skoda. But that's enough talk about torque. Which is the quickest car in the real world? This little Mini's got really good track manners. A little bit of understeer, but then it will drop into a touch of oversteer if you push it into the corners really quickly. That way. And the other. About the Mini Cooper is its traction. It's got the most fantastic grip for those front wheels. This is a fun car to drive. Third gear, only needing really second and third gear to do the lap with. Surely a Skoda can't beat this. Especially a diesel Skoda. And the Mini Cooper sets a time of 58.3 seconds for a flying lap of the Anglesey racetrack. hello to the Skoda with its red line at 4,700 RPM. This can't be a Mini. First corner, oh, it's certainly can't out-handle the Mini. Well, that grips well, but it's rock and roll time. More understeer, but can I have to confess, feel the grunt of that turbo diesel up the hill to radar complex. And shock of shocks, halfway round the lap, it's 0.3 of a second ahead of the Mini. And it does feel a little bit quicker in a straight line, I have to confess. Down to the hairpin, and the Skoda has gained another 1/10 of a second. This is going to be a close run thing. The Mini definitely handles better. The Skoda's definitely got an advantage when it comes to straight line speed. And the diesel wins the day by a clear 0.6 of a second. Who'd have ever thought of a hot hatch TDI?
Here's a good story. Wealthy entrepreneur Alan Gibbs decides to build an amphibious car. Not the usual painfully slow 5 mile an hour bobbing around thing, but one that'll do 30 in the water and 100 on the road. After tens of millions of pounds worth of investment and 7 years' work, he comes up with this, the Gibbs Aquada. It costs £150,000 and Richard Branson has just bought one.
The engineers, based in landlocked Nuneaton, had to conquer lots of conflicts. For starters, a car is heavy and a fast boat needs to be light. Having the nose up on a boat is a good thing because it planes across the water, but the nose up on a car is bad as it could flip over. Now, you don't often drive a car at top speed, whereas with a boat it's at full throttle most of the time. And you cool a car's engine by having cold air rushing through the grille. Holes in a boat is not a good idea. Just think Titanic.
The challenges went on and on. Propellers are illegal for the road, hence the Aquada's jet. There are even different rules about the width of wiring you can use and the type of lighting. Marine laws stipulate a green light for starboard, a red one for port, and a white one on a mast for nighttime. Loads of worry and work later, the Gibbs engineers reckon they've cracked all the problems completely.
It uses a 2.5-litre V6, the same that you'd find in a Land Rover Freelander, and it either sends 175 horsepower to the rear wheels, or it chucks out a ton of thrust from a jet. A ton of thrust. Show me the key. Q-U-A-Y.
Time to get wet.
I'm in drive. I press this little button for more than 3 seconds, but no more than 10. A buzzer starts beeping, and basically it's turning the car into a boat. So all the lights, all the mechanical bits and bobs are being turned into a boat, and I'm going into the water. So I can't use more than 2,000 revs until that noise goes off. Then I can use 3,000 RPM until a flashing light goes solid. It's so clever. It just does everything automatically. That's it. It's now a proper boat with jets and everything. Woo! Because it's still got all the sort of bits that a car's got, it is really easy. Stick my foot hard down on the throttle and steer. Basically, that's about it. It's incredibly agile. If it gets a bit cheeky on the rear end, then a little bit of opposite lock will just sort of counteract it all. Oh, it's chopping. When your fun's over, you just scuttle on back to shore. Take your foot completely off the throttle. Press the button again for a little over 3 seconds. Okay, so the buzzer's going. I can feel the wheels coming down. Sort of aiming for the ramp a bit. A little bit more throttle. Oh. Phew, terra firma. Bingo.
Time to swap the ocean wave for the open road.
As a car, I thought it would handle more like a barge, but the Aquada is surprisingly sporty. I really like the centre driving position. It's sort of McLaren F1 styly, and the hot rod sound of that engine. Most comforting of all, though, is the safety feature, which prevents the tyres from raising when you're on the road. Can you imagine how embarrassing that would be if it did it at a set of traffic lights? Despite that hefty 150 grand price tag, Gibbs reckon they'll shift 200 Aquadas this year. But they hope amphibious cars won't remain exclusive forever. With 170 patents, Gibbs claim to have the amphibious kingdom sewn up and are looking to earn big bucks from licensing the technology. The emergency services and military are obvious clients, and the boat bits could also be adapted to any car or even a lorry. So imagine, next time you buy a new motor, you might not just be choosing metallic paint and a digital radio. You could be ticking the amphibious option too.
Tonight on Fifth Gear, we're looking at high-speed blowouts. We've seen how disaster can be literally just around the corner. The answer must be tyres that let you drive safely even when they're flat.
Today, there are two main solutions. The first is the Michelin PAX system. Now, whereas normal tyres rely on being properly inflated to stay in place, this is mechanically locked onto a special wheel. There's also a solid insert to keep things correctly shaped if you do get a puncture. With a punctured normal tyre, this Renault Scenic follows a pretty frightening course. On optional PAX tyres, with one punctured, the Scenic is more controllable at the same speed.
The PAX system will be fitted to the supposed fastest car in the world, the 250-mile-an-hour Bugatti Veyron, and is currently available on the Rolls-Royce Phantom and the big Audis. Michelin claimed comfort, economy and feedback are even better than on standard tyres. However, PAX requires a special wheel design to work.
The second system is sold by Goodyear and Dunlop. It's a run-flat tyre that will work on any wheel, using sidewalls that are 3 times thicker than normal to carry the weight of the car when the tyres are deflated. This is an armoured Range Rover, but the tyres are also being sold with more everyday cars.
Even Minis are now coming with tyres that promise to get you home when a dirty great nail takes a shine to your tread. But of course, there's a price to be paid, with run flats costing on average about 15% more than standard rubber. But obviously, standard rubber is useless when it's punctured.
You won't get 4 flat tyres every day, but if you did, you'd find it impossible to drive more than a few yards. Then things generally get nasty.
To put run-flat tyres to the ultimate test, we're going to subject them to that extreme challenge.
So here's the test. Your very own Tiff Noodle, pictured here on my right, will be doing 2 laps on a set of run-flat tyres. For the first lap, they'll be properly inflated, but for the second lap, they'll be punctured.
Most new BMW models are available with run-flat tyres, and whilst there's been some debate about the thicker construction reducing ride quality, nothing felt too unpleasant to me. The lap time on 4 correctly inflated run-flats was 1 minute 30 seconds. Time for an unusual pit stop. Well, the first thing you notice is that you think the handbrake's still on because there's a lot of rolling resistance with the flat tyres, but otherwise, so far so good. Ooh, it doesn't sound too happy underneath, but it's still gripping. The tyres are on the rims, still in third. Now we're going to change direction in the middle. Right. Ooh, a lot of noise underneath. Bit of oversteer to left with a bit more oversteer, and then out onto the big straight. Now we've attacked the straight at full speed, so let's see what we can peak out at. We're now doing 90. 95. I hardly even know I've got punctured tyres. 100 miles an hour as we come to brake, and we're going to brake hard and late. And the car responds. This is amazing. The more I drive, the more I can't believe it. Ooh, we are cornering on flat tyres at 90 miles an hour. But even when I hit the rippled concrete, I can hear the rippling, but there's no great kicking through the steering wheel. It's very impressive. The fact the tyres stayed on their rims at all was amazing, and the lap time was only 15 seconds slower. Mind you, you're only supposed to use them for a maximum of 50 miles at 50 miles an hour. But there's no doubt that run-flat tyres work.
More and more cars will soon be coming with run-flat tyres. If you fancy fitting them to your current car, it's recommended that you also fit sensors, costing about £100 a set, in case you don't spot you've got a puncture. In the meantime, of course, keeping an eye on the pressures and condition of your tyres is free and helps you avoid these sort of antics, or this sort of drama.
In tonight's Fifth Gear, I'll be driving the new Ascari in the supercar holiday resort designed especially for it. And there's a sneak preview of the new Land Rover Discovery. But first, Vicky.
Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Mini. Happy birthday to you. The Mini is 45 years old this year, and it's had so many commemorative birthdays that we all know its story backwards. We all know that it was a genius piece of packaging that came out of the oil crisis, and we all know that it was slow to sell at first. We know how they were given to journalists and thus appeared at every big event. And we know how superstars like Steve McQueen, Peter Sellers and the Beatles eventually became owners, making the Mini cool.
But what we want to know is, you've guessed it, what's the ultimate Mini? Well, we've carried out a countrywide search, looking at the most modified, the fastest, the most manoeuvrable, and the one that's been bought by a millionaire collector for £60,000.
Unfortunately, owning a supercar is too expensive even for my budget, but other people have different problems. Very few who can actually afford to buy a supercar. The problem is never having the cash to pay for it. No, the problem is what the hell you do with it. I mean, go out for a drive and you've broken every speed limit in the land before you've even got out of first gear. So, where you want it is parked right next door to your very own playground. A dream that has now become a reality, as just 1 hour's drive from Malacca Airport in the foothills of Spain lies the world's first supercar racing resort, with 5-star luxury wherever you look. Plus, unlimited use of 4 miles of freshly laid tarmac in the form of an exclusive race circuit. And if you get tired of your own car, there's a racing academy complete with every kind of track day machine. There are Formula 1 cars, Le Mans cars, touring cars, and single-seaters, all warmed up and ready for your instant gratification. The brain and passion behind it all comes from this man, motorsport fanatic and playboy extraordinaire, Klaus Zwart.
We are different from any other circuit in the world. This is a totally unique concept. It's never been done before. There's many supercar manufacturers that produce fantastic supercars. But the opportunities for these cars to be driven will become more and more limited. Everywhere there is speed control, radio control, very severe fines, even jail sentences. So I think there's time, but that it's about time that somebody did something like what we've done, where you can actually have fun with your supercar.
And to go with his new resort, Klaus has built his own supercar, the Ascari KZ1, named after the legendary racing driver Alberto Ascari, and he's building 50 of them. With a BMW M-Power engine, it'll hit 200 miles an hour and get to 60 in just 3.8 seconds. But is it a credible supercar? Well, I guess I'd better use our circuit to find out. It's designed to be a racer's paradise, including bends modelled on the best bits of the best circuits in the world. Turn 5 could be Copse Corner at Silverstone. Turn 7 sees you climbing Mount Panorama at Australia's legendary Bathurst circuit. Turn 16 and you're plunging into Eau Rouge at Spa. Turn 19 and you're high on the banking of Daytona's Super Speedway. Add to that another 20 demanding corners and it makes for one of the most intense circuits I've ever driven. So what about the car? Well, in supercar terms, it's more Ferrari 360 or Lamborghini Gallardo than Pagani Zonda or Enzo Ferrari. But having said that, as soon as you open up that chunky BMW V8 behind you, you know you're in for a good time. Ascari have rebuilt the 5-litre V8 to produce 520 horsepower, and with loads of torque way down low, you've got a really wide rev band to work with. The brakes are very impressive. A firm prod gives instant response from the race-bred discs and pads. The only disappointment initially is this prototype car has been set up for sort of safe country road driving. It's fairly soft, gives good ride quality, but what it does do is understeer. Which is never my cup of tea. Unless, of course, you give it a little bit extra. This KZ1 has got so much traction that it makes you wonder why Lamborghini makes such a fuss about having a four-wheel drive. I mean, here, we haven't even got traction control. Even if I throw the car at this corner, I can just power slide it out. If this is what they call a holiday resort, I'm going to book a season ticket. At 230 grand, the KZ1 is certainly supercar money, though buyers will get a discount on the £100,000 resort joining fee. Now, the question is, do I drive the Grand Prix car today, or do I leave it till tomorrow? Oh, what the hell.
You join me here in Surrey. We're on our own ultimate mini adventure. It's the Mini World Show, a 45th birthday party for the Mini, and they're celebrating in a thoroughly British fashion. The little car's appeal is massive. People from all walks of life give up their weekends to turn a visit to a car park into a nice day out. But could the ultimate Mini really be lurking around here? Well, you can be sure the Mini's personality will always shine through. Although modifying the new Mini is the growth scene, we're most interested in the classics, like Dom Westall's replica of the wicker-look car Peter Sellers owned and Inspector Clouseau drove. But the Ultimate Mini needs more than a celeb connection and a hidden TV. So could Kevin Palmer's home-hacked 1980 Mayfair be a candidate? He's shortened it by 4 feet, and thanks to nitrous oxide, he can pull wheelies.
What's it like at full chat on nitrous, steaming along in a shortened Mini?
I would fully recommend steel underpants.
I mean, where do you use this car?
I'm really, really lucky because I've got a testing ground alongside me called Blue Water Park.
What, that shopping centre with all women and children everywhere?
Yeah.
A famous proving ground?
And they've got 2 lanes, and you need 2 lanes when you hit the nitrous.
Well, of course you do, yeah.
So I tried it out, actually, Sunday, just gone, and the way it went, it just took off.
And what happened to the needle? Whereabouts did it go?
Off the speedo.
You've just admitted to a very serious driving crime on television.
It could be that the speedo's out. It could be out of calibration, but it did go off the end. Maybe it's a rev counter instead.
Yeah, right. Our search for the Ultimate Mini takes us from the short to something a little longer. Mini pickups are becoming quite rare and collectible, but Joe Glass's is unique thanks to rear hinge doors and hydraulic suspension.
How much did it cost?
Well, you could buy every model of Porsche for what it costs to build. You can buy a 924, a 944, a 911, a 968, a Boxster, and tax and insure them all for what this cost.
So tens of thousands of pounds?
Yeah.
Are you a stockbroker?
No, I'm an electrician. You could actually get a system like this fitted for your car for about £2,000 upwards, but it wouldn't move as fast as this. It'd just make you go up and down. Mine does everything.
Does it do this when you're going along?
It does if there's no policeman about.
Does that attract members of the opposite sex?
Well, if this car was actually a person, it'd be Hugh Hefner. I mean, it'd have a better sex life than I've ever had.
That good?
It's that good.
You know what? The huge effort people go to make their Mini unique is equalled by just one thing: the universal affection we give them in return.
There's no doubt about it. All this would have brought a tear to Isagonis's eye. But I've just heard that the Ultimate Mini hasn't actually made it down to Surrey. It's in Huddersfield.
The recipe is simple. Rip out the back and fill it with the 1300cc engine from a Suzuki Hayabusa. Then turbocharge it and get a chain to drive the rear wheels.
The result? 400 horsepower, like a Ferrari 360. 0 to 60, 3.4 seconds, like a McLaren F1.
Driving it is intense. It costs £25,000 to build, but in truth, it's still a work in progress. So it may be the fastest Mini in the world, but it's not quite the ultimate yet. The search continues later in the show.
We are searching for the Ultimate Mini, and the trail has brought us to Mansell Lacey near Hereford. It's playing host to that very British phenomenon, entry-level motorsport.
This is auto testing, an extreme test of a person's skill at the wheel. Basically, the idea is to go left and right, in and out, round and round, as quickly as is humanly possible.
This is the first round of the British Championship. It's where Colin McRae started out, but it's a sport for any age, sex or ability. We're here to see 22-year-old Paul Swift. His dad is precision driver Russ Swift, and I reckon his weapon of choice is the most manoeuvrable Mini in the world, and it gets my vote for being the ultimate. It was the car his mum learnt to drive in, and the car his dad won the Autotest Championship with 20 years ago. Paul has subsequently turned it from an £800 banger into a £6,000 special. There's no roof or boot, because the key to flickability is lightness.
All of the heavy pieces of the car we try and replace with lighter components. The front end now is carbon fibre, and we've drilled a lot of holes without weakening it too much, just to get as much weight out of the car as possible.
What have you actually done to the engine?
It's been specially built for low-down torque. Top-end speed isn't that important in auto testing, so you want to get from point to point as fast as you can. So it's a bigger bore engine, and it's all about grunt. And the gearbox is basically a 2-speed box, first, second, and then you got the reverse gear as well, so you don't hit fourth instead of reverse.
Honing the car to perfection isn't the be-all and end-all, though. The best drivers make their motor flow like water. You need absolutely exquisite control and a precise idea of exactly where you're going.
I've got here a map of the course, but just look at it, it's absolutely mind-boggling. You'll see some of the drivers getting on the start line, shutting their eyes and visualising their way around all the twists and turns. Thing is, one would be bad enough. Today, they have 5 to remember. It's an amazing feat of mental acuity.
So, obviously, I had to rise to the challenge. It couldn't be that hard.
Not reverse! Oh, that's with pride and joy. Backwards! 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 Oh no, he's got a penalty. 5. Might need a bit more practice, I think. Potential.
Obviously, I wasn't going to be vying with Paul for first place just yet. That job was left to British champ Dave Mosey, who also drives a Mini Special. His fluid style was a joy to behold and was really setting the pace. What's more, he managed to complete all of his runs before the torrential rain came. Frankly, with one run left to do, Paul had no chance. But then he did a funny thing. Rather than just visualising the route, he actually ran round it. It came down to one man and his machine. You could have cut the tension with a knife. Paul really pulled out all the stops, and amazingly, despite the horrendous conditions, he was actually 2 seconds quicker in the wet than in the dry. His secrets? Well, overinflated tyres make the car easier to chuck, and by locking the wheels under braking, you can go quickly from first to reverse without stripping any gears. Unbelievably, Paul won! Hooray! But join us later, when we might have found an even more ultimate Mini. Time for some quick news about the brand new Land Rover Discovery. It's the 3rd version of the best-selling big 4x4 and will be in the shops later this year. Although Land Rover are playing up its premium feel, what we like is the no-nonsense approach they've taken. There's been no arty-farty designing going on here, just a chiselled, muscular look with every feature existing for a practical purpose. See that wonky boot line? Well, that lower section is easier to reach over and means you don't need to open the whole tailgate. Notice how there's only one air intake on one side? That's because it only needs one. To hell with symmetry! Inside, the new Disco looks even more spacious than the old one. That's because it is. They reckon it'll swallow 7 adults, and because the middle and back rows of seats are elevated, like in a cinema, everyone will get a nice view. The new terrain response system promises to make even scaredy cats look like jungle trekking heroes. A simple dial tailors the car's systems to the type of ground you're on, looking after ride height, engine torque, hill descent control, traction control and transmission. Hurrah! An end to Anorak's endlessly debating diff lock settings, at last!
It's the final leg of our hunt for the ultimate Mini, and if you ask me, the answer's obvious.
Top 5 Minis: Minestrone, Mini Mouse, Mini Eggs, Mini Skirt, Mini Cooper.
Nothing beats those original cars created by John Cooper, and it's the 40th anniversary of Paddy Hopkirk conquering bonnet-high snowdrifts to win the Monte Carlo Rally in a Cooper S. But if you think that sort of credibility should be consigned to the history books, then this man may change your mind.
Hello, Fifth Gear. Welcome to my crib.
Brandon Wang is one of the most eminent car collectors in the world. He's indulged his passion with a multi-million-pound set of cars. The rarer, the better. And in this stable of prancing horses is an ex-Paddy Hopkirk Mini Cooper S. Surely the ultimate Mini.
To me, they are, even in today's standard, a fantastic driving car, both on the track and on the road. And my everyday car in London is a Mini. I had always wanted to do the Monte Carlo Rally, the historic one, of course, you know, because we read about the real one in the 60s, how the Mini slaughter all the big 911s and so forth. So about 2 years ago, when I learned about they were running the Monte Carlo Rally, so I would say maybe I should find a little Mini to do it, and brought it to Monte Carlo, did the rally, and had a great time with it. And everything worked, which is amazing. Everything, all the switches, all the gauges, everything works in this car with a co-pilot. And I have to scream and yell at him, don't touch that, don't touch that, we're not there yet. You know? I had a co-pilot who like the fiddle with all those switches. When you think of Mini, you think about 5,000, 7,000 pounds, and the good ones are maybe 10. This is a lot more. I think you got to times that 10 by 5, 6 times to get it. But it is a very special car. I mean, I have no problem, you know, buying a car like that. It's just, you know, one-off that you probably had one chance in your lifetime to buy something.
In tonight's Fifth Gear, Tiff drives a new version of one of his favourite cars, the Noble. And what could be the world's most secure car park. But first, to Italy.
This week on Fifth Gear, we're bringing you an exclusive insight into a secret world. The story revolves around 45-year-old father of 3 and property developer Frank Mountain, a car nut just like you and me. Except unlike you and me, he's about to buy Michael Schumacher's Formula 1 car. This is the F2001, the car that won the championship a couple of years ago. Since then, it's been kept under lock and key at the Ferrari factory, but soon it'll reside in Frank's garage next to his F40, Carrera GT and DB9. We've been given unprecedented access to every bit of the deal as Ferrari welcome Frank to the family. The star treatment begins here, in the Holy of Holies, Enzo Ferrari's old office, left untouched since the day he died. Join us in a moment to find out exactly how to buy an F1 car.
This is the Noble M12 GTO, and it's one of the greatest success stories of the British sports car industry. And I'd like to think I played a small part in that success story. The M12 was designed by Lee Noble.
That's me.
And when I first drove a car that bore his name, the M10, I wasn't entirely complimentary.
And I remember watching that review, made me feel like throwing the TV out the window.
I remember saying that whilst it handled well, it didn't exactly look, well, beautiful.
That didn't exactly help our sales figures, so we went back to the drawing board and built the M12.
Which was a sensation to drive. The turbos whistled in your ears, the handling was perfect, and the steering had just the best feel.
Yep, I remember watching that one too. Next day, the phone never stopped ringing. And since then, we sold 300 cars.
It was hard to think that there was anything they could do to improve the car.
Well, actually, there was.
And this is it. The Noble M12 GTO 3R. So, what's new? Well, visually, not much. For your £52,000, you do now get leather as standard, but the real improvements are under the skin, where the Ford-based V6 has been increased from 2.5 to 3 litres. The new model also features a 6-speed gearbox and a limited slip differential. But do these really make that much difference? Well, what better place to find out than on the Anglesey racetrack, where I first drove the M12 some 3 years ago. And it doesn't take long to remember just why I fell in love with this little Noble. It's mainly based around this steering feel, the fact that I can know exactly what's going on with the chassis and turn into the slide so consistently. Although on this racetrack today, with its combination of tyre and oil on the surface, plus now water, has made an ice rink, and I've experienced my first ever bit of understeer in a Noble. Well, that extra 42 horsepower the 352 bhp power plant has certainly comes in handy. But to be perfectly honest, I'm having a bit of trouble at the moment getting that power stuck to the road. Even in the wet, this car is just as much fun to drive. So, is the Noble M12 GTO 3R any better than the original? Well, to be honest, in these conditions, it's been impossible to find out, but it's certainly been fun trying. One thing is for sure, though, pound for pound, the Noble M12 is still one of the best sports GTs you can buy. And it's British, and so is this weather.
We're exclusively following Frank Mountain buying an ex-Schumacher F1 car. So where did it all start?
I came over last October for the 612 launch, talking to all the people from Ferrari, and obviously they know I like cars, and I've got a number of Ferraris, and said to me, will I be interested in an F1 car? So I said, well, he's the Pope of Catholic, of course I would be. Various discussions took place. I came over, I think, late November to have a meeting. I think it was probably an interview more than anything, to see if I was up for the job. From then on, it's just sort of grown to being here today to sign up for the car. Everyone wants to know how much this is all going to cost, or how much the car costs. It's not as much as you think. First of all, you negotiate, and then you agree on a figure. Suffice to say, it's a fair figure that we've agreed on.
I can't tell you that fair figure, but included in the deal is a starter, tyre warmers to get the rubber nice and grippy, jack stands for playing at pit stops, and a spare set of the Featherlight wheels. They've told him to run it on unleaded straight from the sponsor's pumps. Schumacher used more than one car during the 2001 season, and Frank's is the pick of the crop. Chassis 211 won in Monaco, Hungary, and was the car he clinched the championship with.
Now we got here today, and it's all about to start. The butterflies are starting to take over. There's two sides of my head thinking, hey, what have I done here? But the second side is, I'm just making a dream come true.
The dream begins in the back streets of Maranello, Ferrari's hometown. There's always some sort of arm-waving antics going on, and cars worth millions are just casually parked at the roadside. Buy an F1 car and your day begins with a nose around an amazing set of racing cars, including a secret one-off prototype that happens to be for sale as well. You'd have no idea there was a multi-million-pound collection tucked away in such a humble setting.
If you went to McLaren, you'd come to a nice, smart glass building, state-of-the-art, everything would be pristine. You come to Ferrari, you truck up outside, there's a garage with a red door, washing hanging up, and a flat next door. You don't even know this exists. And you walk in, and here they are. There's every piece of history you could think of from a Ferrari. The Ferraris are about passion, and that's what they get here. It's full of passion.
Frank is the ultimate Ferrari fan and wasn't in a hurry to get to his new car, even savouring the jumble of spare parts.
It's just like how I'd like to be my own garage. It's got bits of Formula One cars. You've got Niki Lauda's here from the 70s. You've got Mansell's car. You've got nose cones from other Schumacher's car. Then the best bit, you've got a 360 door, a 360 boot. And over there, if you can get over there, there's just a pile of seats. A complete and utter mess. It's just bits and pieces all over the place.
Then suddenly, Amongst the jumble, the magical meeting took place.
The first sight of it?
The first sight, yeah.
The first sight of his F1 car. If you look up there, look. It's his F1 car.
It's my car. It's everyone's dream, isn't it? Everyone who likes cars. If you could wake up one day and come to a place like this, we all know Prost, Mansell's, Berger's, Schumacher's, and now there's my car.
Join us later when Frank finally gets his hands on Schumacher's car. Will he be able to drive it? Will he even fit in it?
Here we go. Problem.
Recently, Focus, a leading science and technology magazine, published a list of the 10 most secure places on Earth. All the usual suspects were there. Fort Knox, home of the American Gold Reserve, Saddam Hussein's gold-plated Baghdad bunker, and Area 51, deep in the Nevada desert. But sneaking in at number 10 was this place, the council-owned car park in Bold Lane, Derby. This used to be the most crime-ridden car park in Derbyshire, but in the 6 years since the new security system was fitted, there hasn't been one single crime committed here. And the operators are so confident that they'll refund you the cost of any car or contents that get stolen. To test the system, I've called on the help of my friend Grant. He's going to try and get into the car park and steal this car, a rather nice Mercedes SL 500. Of course, the car itself is bristling with immobilizers and alarms. So to make the task as easy as possible, we've given him the keys. Grant's first problem is that the only way to get in on foot is with the bar-coded ticket he would have got if he'd driven in.
There's Grant skulking about outside, looking suitably shifty. He can't get in because he hasn't got a ticket, so it looks like he's fallen the first hurdle. The system worked. What's he going to do now? At the sly old fox, nicely holding the door open, Grant is in. Now there we pick him up, coming up the stairs. Obviously, because he hasn't got a ticket, these guys here will catch sight of that and they'll keep an eye on him as he goes around the car park. He's walking with purpose, he knows where he's going.
There are 200 cameras here, with every parking space covered on at least 2 angles.
If you wanted to get spotted by a camera, he's doing a very good job. And there he's found it, our Mercedes SL 500.
Grant may have the keys to the Merc, but if he moves it, we'll know. You see, every parking space is fitted with a movement sensor. Once parked, you then insert the bar-coded ticket into the bay controller, and that activates the sensor.
And he's just skulking around the back, hoping that no one can see him. He's on the cameras. He's ducking underneath the car.
Grant's made quite a pathetic attempt to confuse the sensor by slipping a piece of metal over it.
Oh, and we have an alarm, Mark.
We do.
They're flashing on the screen up there.
We've got him there. We've got him on the camera.
Does he know you've got him there?
Oh, no.
As soon as an alarm sounds, the car park is locked down. All the doors are closed and locked. Grant's not going anywhere.
And there goes Aaron, our man, to have a word with him. You're Nick's son, you're going to jail. Let's face it, this is what car parks should be like. If you pay to leave your car somewhere, then you should be assured of a decent level of security. OK, this place did cost a lot to equip, so you will have to pay 20p an hour more than other car parks in the area. But the reduction in crime and antisocial behaviour has made it one of the busiest in the city.
And I, for one, would like to see car parks like this in every city in the country.
Frank Mountain is buying Michael Schumacher's 2001 Formula One car. Everyone preparing customer cars has a background with the F1 team. Chief engineer Andrea Gaglietti used to look after Rubens Barrichello and Eddie Irvine. The idea is you get F1 expertise to personally set up your car. The 2001 chassis handles particularly well and is ideal for the novice, but the seat and controls need to be fine-tuned to your tastes after a little bit of business.
The money's been sent to you now by the bank.
Ah, okay.
Okay, I've got a cheque as well, but I thought I'd just send you the money by TT. Okay?
The first seat Frank tried belonged to Rubens Barrichello, but that was too wide because...
Barrichello has a big arse.
You heard it here first. So then he tried Michael Schumacher's seat. You can tell it's his because it's lined with gold, like a throne. Except this was too small.
Problem. Fun? No.
Which must mean Michael has a tiny bottom. The solution was for Frank to have his own personal seat moulding. It's quick setting, so you need to make sure you're sitting comfortably.
There are about 100 different positions I could wriggle in at the moment. And there's bolts and bumps and everything else that dig into certain parts of your backside. And I'm just trying to find where they don't dig in. And I'm squirming around, but if I don't get it right, they're about to put the mix in. And once the mix, it's one shot.
Bene a modo e distribuito. Vai, vai, non tutto da un lato. Vai, 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 vai.
The mixture expands like foam. You need to ensure it oozes into every nook and cranny to create a perfect mould. Everything in Formula One has this bespoke specialist feel. You even need an expert to adjust the wing mirrors.
Molto bene now.
Indeed, in order to run the car at various demonstration races around the world, Frank is having to send his own mechanics out to the factory for training. However, mastering the complex steering wheel and the controls is down to Frank himself. There are nearly 40 buttons managing different aspects of the car's systems. The 3,000-page manual comes with a crib sheet, but we asked the man who used to brief Irvine to brief you.
iFit Gear, this is the Formula One steering wheel of a 2001 car, which will be driven by Frank Mountain. It can adjust the traction control setting, it can adjust the differential electronic system by these two rotary switches. It can change engine braking, high speed, low speed, manage the clutch using these two levers, and it can upshift and downshift by this lever here.
On top of that, there's buttons for neutral, the launch control, and things like the fuel mix, rev limiter, and various sensors around the car. Modern drivers prefer to solve small problems via the steering wheel rather than a pit stop, and the best can use it all with barely a glance. But Schumacher demanded even more for his later cars. A mind-boggling system of selectors lets him fine-tune the settings for one corner while he's driving through another. It's vastly different to the wheel from just a decade ago.
We are talking about 10 years of technology. It looks like 100.
The most important control of all is still the throttle, though, and naturally, it isn't straightforward.
If you look down at the pedals, Schumacher runs what they call a long accelerator pedal. The reason why he does that is he can balance the car better. So the power comes in gradually and on a longer pedal. Barrichello's completely opposite. His throttle actually starts about here, then it comes in massively. So he has a very fine line before the power band really comes in. Two different driving techniques. Didn't know anything about that. No one, I think, understands it when you're looking at these cars going around until you actually sit in one. I'm sticking with the Schumacher one because I think that's going to suit my driving style a lot better.
But before he gets to drive it tomorrow, he needs to sign the contract. And you don't do big bucks deals without first checking the small print.
It's just, they'll do a buyback on the car within 30 days. I'm not allowed to sell it to anyone unless I offer it to them first, but I have to receive their consent, not reasonably withheld. I have to give them use of the car for F1 publicity and promotional purposes, basically at their cost. I'm not allowed to change the livery of the car. And of course, it's a law applying to this contract is Italian law. It means if you have a problem, it's a bigger problem.
That didn't put Frank off. And in the finest tradition of Italian business, it was signature, champagne...
Congratulations. Welcome to the family, yeah?
Thank you very much.
...and dinner. They take you to Schumacher's favourite restaurant. The Montana has a proud history of feeding Ferrari's most important clients and drivers, who all sign napkins to leave a memento. And because when you buy an F1 car you become part of the family, Frank had to sign too. But stay off the champers, Franco. Tomorrow is driving day. And what a place to have your first drive of an F1 car. The emotive Fiorano, Ferrari's private test track, stamping ground of legendary road car test driver Dario Bonuzzi and his F1 counterpart, Luca Badoer.
Hi, Fifth Gear, and welcome to Fiorano.
A lap in a challenge to Dali takes 1 minute 27, and Enzo 1:25. But an F1 car does it in just 55 seconds.
The most important thing is remember to brake on the end of the stride, because the speed is very high, and you know, Formula One is not a real car. I think is an airplane with the wheels.
Badoer's presence increased the pressure. How did Frank feel about such distinguished company?
I hope he doesn't watch, because I don't think I'm not intending to be quicker than him.
We'll see about that. It was time to drive. As he got in, one of the mechanics told him just to floor it. Let the car do the work, was the advice. But imagine the pressure. You've been building up to this moment all your life. Perhaps inevitably, he stalled. Frank teetered round at first, but he wasn't doing too badly given that 14 months ago he didn't even have a race licence. Although Badoer left satisfied his test driving job was safe, Frank's times came down and he was thrilled to achieve a 1 minute 30, equal to the lap record of a Ferrari 360.
I know how Neil Armstrong felt when he landed on the moon. I think this must be the closest to it. But surprisingly, not as difficult to drive as you think. But just that when you put your foot down, the speed is just, wow, where does it go? And the noise, my ears are just ringing from the noise behind me. I've just done what they all do and we watch on a box every couple of weeks during the summer. And I tell you, if you get one chance in life, you've got to have a go in one of these.
The excitement continued. After downloading data from the car, they discussed where he could go quicker on his second drive.
I'm having to brake far too early.
Now, an F1 engine is a 200 mile an hour, 18,000 RPM, highly strung thoroughbred.
No gears.
And the moment it detects something untoward, will shut down into a safe mode to protect itself. But this hiccup didn't spoil Frank's day. The repair would take 2 hours, time Frank didn't have, as Ferrari's jet was waiting to take him to his other new toy, a Limontine. But first, an important call.
Hello, Mum. Yeah, just got around very safely, no problems. I spoke to Sally earlier, so she knows it's all okay. What have I been doing? I've just been driving Schumacher's car. Well, actually, now it's mine. It's my car. Yes, I bought it. It's mine. No, it used to be his, but now it's mine.
In this week's Fifth Gear, Chrysler's 300C. Could it really be better than a 5 Series? And the man who's so good at the World Rally Championship on his computer, he's decided to enter the real thing. But first, 4x4s.
Whether we like it or not, they're more popular than ever, particularly this lot, the so-called soft roaders. Sales are booming, up by 10% last year and tenfold over the last decade. But what's the best family 4x4 on the market today?
To find out, we brought together 10 of the likeliest contenders for under £20,000.
And where possible, we've chosen the most powerful petrol models we can afford. Here they are in alphabetical order.
First off, it's H for Honda and the British-built CR-V. We can afford the top-of-the-range end. The prominently snouted Outlander is new from Mitsubishi. Its four-wheel drive system is based on the one in the Evo. Next up is Nissan's recently facelifted X-Trail. This 2.5 Sport is just under 19 grand.
And there's Subaru's Forester in 2-litre X-Spec with a 125 horsepower engine.
Suzuki's popular Grand Vitara is next. This is the 2.7-litre version of the stretched XL7 model.
Finally, there's Toyota's RAV4, the UK's second best-selling 4x4, and we've got a 2-litre XT3.
During the show, we'll be narrowing them down to just one car. The best family 4x4 on sale in Britain today.
And you'll get the chance to win it in our latest fifth gear competition. Stay with us.
We're in the south of France, Le Côte d'Azur, where Formula 1 Supremo Bernie Ecclestone has his own high-tech racetrack, his own airport, and a rather luxurious hotel. But what we're interested in is this. The Chrysler 300C, the American alternative to a 5 Series or E-Class. Square jaw, aggressive stance, bulging arches. It's a muscle car, just what we want from an American automobile. And the coolness continues. I mean, take a look at this. Hemi. You can forget your SEs and your avant-gardes. This is what the kids want to see. The Hemi engine dates back to the stylish 50s. The 300 was the most powerful car in America, and its motor became a hot rod hit and symbol of fuel-guzzling cool. Today's Hemi has a conscience, though. When you're cruising at low speeds, the V8 sneakily shuts down half the cylinders to save on a bit of gas. This is also a yank tank with celeb connections. Before the 300C even went on sale, Chrysler gave one to 50 Cent. Not that it needed any sort of endorsement. The 300C is going down an absolute storm in the American customizing scene. It's the only car under 60,000 bucks that can house Dub 2s, the oh-so-important 22-inch wheels. If only Chrysler had customized the interior. All the materials, and particularly the plastics, feel cheap. The leather's already looking tired, and the fake tortoise shell is more like a 70s ashtray rather than the classy finish needed in a car like this. On the upside, the attention to detail with onboard functions is amazing. You can personalise most of the car settings, even being able to adjust the pedals. Time to find some bends, and luckily this was my kind of town. Now this is a fairly famous road we're on, just round the corner from Paul Ricard Circuit. Now in the summer, this road is littered with women of the night, would you believe? They park up in their car and hang a leg out the window, revealing all sorts of saucy lingerie, so I've been told. And before you ask, no, I didn't see any. I had my hands full of Hemi. Now, this may be rear-wheel drive, but it's not that sporty. Throw it at a corner, well, it feels a bit heavy and a bit lazy. It certainly isn't a 5 Series, but I'll tell you what I do like. 340 horsepower. You best hold on tight, fella. With 0 to 60 in 6 and a bit seconds and those gangster looks, it's hard not to think you're in a cop show car chase. Oh, look, there's a proper speedway track here. But sliding around on the loose isn't the trump card. This Hemi's strength is the fact it isn't a hot rod. I'll tell you what the 300C is. It's relaxing. It's very quiet, very comfortable. The gearbox is smooth. But uncharacteristically for an American car, the steering is heavy, it's weighted. I can feel the road. I can imagine myself tramming along at 155 without a care in the world. The car won't be on sale until October next year, by which time there will be diesel and V6 options. And we're promised that the 300C will be much cheaper than the equivalent powered opposition. So, should you buy one? Come here. I wouldn't cancel the order on the E-Class or the BMW 5 Series just yet, but what I would say is if you're in the market for something a bit quirky, something a bit different, other than, say, a Volvo or a Saab, then this could be the car for you. It drives very well, it's got a great engine, it looks fantastic. But there's one thing that destroys the car for me, and that's the interior. Its use of nasty plastics is just dreadful.
Welcome back to our quest to find the best family 4x4 for under 20 grand.
We've assembled 10 strong contenders, and first up in our whittling down process is some point scoring.
We'll be marking them in 4 different categories, awarding a maximum of 5 points in each. Only the highest scoring 4 cars will go through. First, it's space.
And it's maximum points to the Suzuki. Not only is it big in there, but your money also buys you 7 seats.
The Kia and the Hyundai are nearly as big inside. The Jeep is surprisingly spacious, and the Nissan isn't far behind. So it's 4 points to each of them.
The Toyota, the Honda, the Mitsubishi and the Land Rover are all medium-sized, so space is OK for passengers, but you'll find that wardrobe a bit of a squash. 3 points apiece to them.
And the lowest score, just 2 points, goes to the Subaru. It's more of an estate car with 4-wheel drive than a true off-roader. The rear seats are cramped and it's not got the biggest of boots. Next, safety. And the Honda, Hyundai, Jeep, Kia, Nissan and Toyota all get a decent 4 stars in Euro NCAP, so it's maximum points.
The Mitsubishi and the Subaru haven't been tested by Euro NCAP, but they do well in American crash tests, so it's maximum points to them too.
But Land Rover's Freelander only gets a mediocre 3 NCAP stars, so it's just 3 points here. Likewise, the Suzuki Grand Vitara. But what about performance? Well, none of these cars are electrifying, but there are significant differences between them.
It may not have a V6, but the Nissan is the only one to break the 10-second 0 to 60 barrier, so we're giving it 4 points.
While there's a whole huddle of cars that make it between 10 and 12 seconds, so it's 3 points to each of them.
But there are 2 cars that are definitely left behind. The hefty Jeep manages 13.9 seconds, so it's 2 points here.
And the real heavyweight of our selection, complete with its separate chassis, is the Kia. We can't afford a petrol version, and this diesel takes a yawning 14.5 seconds to get to 60, so it's just 1 point here. For our final round of points, we're looking at reliability, and a quick look at some of the surveys reveals some clear leaders.
Toyotas, Hondas and Hyundais seem to top the reliability lists, so it's 5 points to them.
Nissans, Subarus and Suzukis are good, but they can't quite match the impeccable behaviour of our leaders, so it's 4 points to them.
Mitsubishi's fare somewhere in the middle, as do Kias and Jeeps, so 3 points.
But Land Rover still struggle to keep their cars together, and surveys rate them poorly for reliability. We know Land Rover are working hard on quality, but we have to be circumspect. 2 points.
So the final table shows it's the Nissan and Hyundai, followed by the Honda and the Toyota, that go through to our next driving round after the break.
Welcome back to our test to find the best family 4x4 for under £20,000.
We rated our original 10 cars for space, safety, performance and likely reliability, and we've narrowed them down to just 4 leading contenders.
Now, on fifth gear, we've highlighted in the past that 4x4s with a higher centre of gravity can be more likely to roll over. So, how sure-footed will our top quartet feel when I take to the test track and Vicky heads out for the open roads?
Toyota's RAV4 has always been one of the best 4x4s to drive, and this is no exception. It's nimble and it behaves more like a GTI than some GTIs I could mention. There's very little body roll when cornering. The steering is neat and precise, and the whole thing soaks up lumps and bumps very well.
There is a fair bit of understeer. You feel the back picking up underneath you, but you never feel insecure. You never feel like you're about to be in any trouble. Also surprised at how little lock is needed around this little tight circuit. And that little 2-litre engine pulls really well. Not quite a GTI, but a lot of fun.
So, how will the Nissan fare?
Compared to the nimble RAV4, this X-Trail feels like a bus to drive. However, the engine is surprisingly athletic once you give it its head. Body roll is kept to a reasonable minimum around the corners, but the steering is slow and cumbersome, and it weights up a lot when you're trying to park.
It's definitely got more understeer straight away than the little neat and tidy RAV4. But, and here's the difference, with the Nissan, I can flick this little switch, and I'm now in four-wheel drive. I've got more traction, and it's actually handling more neutrally. But again, no real worry about rolling. These smaller off-roaders certainly feel much more car-like. Pretty impressive.
Next up, it's the Honda.
Computer game fans will love the design of this handbrake. It's exactly like a joystick. The 2-litre engine is responsive and willing, as is the chassis, but the front tyres could do with a bit more grip when cornering hard.
Straight away, we're not nearly as happy as we were in either the Toyota or the Nissan. Huge amount of traction problems. Now, the Honda, of course, doesn't have all those four-wheel drive tweaks. It's mainly a front-wheel drive car with power going to the rear end only when the front starts spinning. Jenson Button maybe ought to get on pole, but I don't think this Honda will.
And finally, the Hyundai.
If big and rugged is your idea of an off-roader, then the Santa Fe will fit your bill. The steering wheel is huge, and it's also got a pretty poor turning circle, which means low-speed manoeuvres will take a bit of time. The V6 engine isn't the silkiest on the market, and it only comes coupled to an automatic gearbox, though there is a semi-automatic mode for the enthusiastic driver.
What a shame we haven't got a manual. I think this Hyundai might be giving the others a run for their money if it had. What I really need is to get first gear so the lusty V6 can punch us out. The only problem is that it's got a 15 horsepower, even more than the Nissan. It weighs an extra 200 kilos, and you can feel that weight under braking and in the body rolling cornering. A spirited attempt, but it's the most cumbersome of our four on road and track, and the first to go.
So we've reduced the field to just 3.
And we'd happily recommend any of these as excellent buys.
But only 2 can go through to the final round, so we have to say goodbye to...
the Honda. When push comes to shove, it just isn't quite on the pace. So the final showdown is between the Nissan X-Trail
and the Toyota RAV4.
Join us in a moment to find out the winner.
This is the home of Sarah Hopkins. She's a proud mum, thanks to the rather surprising news that her son Richard has just won the World Rally Championship. Well, that's what he's told her.
But in actual fact, young Richie boy isn't lying. It's just that he's won his rallies in his bedroom.
In his day job, Richard is a successful IT manager, but in his spare time, he's managed to become among the best in the world at the World Rally Championship 3 game for Sony's PlayStation. With amazingly realistic models of 126 stages from last year's World Championship and 19 cars to choose from, the game is state-of-the-art. And so is Richard's driving. In internet competitions, he's beaten players from the rest of Europe and America.
So, he's a bloke who lives at home with his mum playing computer games. Big deal. Well, what separates young Richie boy from your average bedroom racer is that he's moved from games to the real thing. And he's not doing too badly either.
In fact, using a combination of his own cash and sponsorship, he's got himself a drive in £150,000 worth of WRC Subaru Impreza, once driven by Richard Burns, no less. Later in the year, he'll be driving it for real on the Cardiff Docks Rally stage of Wales Rally GB, one of his favourites in the game, that's just a few miles down the road from his home. I caught up with him as he was gently familiarising himself with the Cardiff stage. So how do you make the break from game to reality?
thought one day that if I could drive a computer-generated car, maybe I should have a go at driving a real one. Went to the rally school, 2 months later doing my first rally.
And so, did you enter into a championship?
Yeah, I did the Welsh Rally Championship in a production class Subaru, and was leading the production class for most of the year, and then unfortunately finished second.
So what happened after that?
I did the Network Q Rally in Great Britain, and managed to finish that when a couple of the big guys, Marcus Gronholm and Richard Burns, went out, so I can say I beat them as well.
How does it compare to the game?
Well, in some ways there are quite a few similarities. The dynamics of driving the cars are actually very similar. But of course, the thing you don't have in real life is a reset button when things go wrong.
So the question is Richard quicker at home or on the track? Well, it's immediately apparent that real life is slower, and that's not down to Richard's driving. In the game, you don't have to slow down so much for surface changes or obstacles. And on this stage, the game misses out a couple of jumps and has a shorter bridge. And of course, you can make as many mistakes as you like in the game, but it's different in reality.
Oh man.
Well, has this put you off?
No.
But does it suggest to you that it's not quite as easy as it might seem on the computer
It's
game?
definitely not as easy, and this is the time when, if this was a game, it'd be the reset button.
But if rallying isn't your bag, there are plenty of other games that can prepare you for real driving. So maybe our race and rally stars of the future will come not from the traditional training ground of karting, but from the twilight world of computer gaming.
Welcome back to our 4x4 test. We've narrowed down 10 of the best 4x4s for under 20 grand to just 2, the Toyota RAV4 and Nissan's X-Trail. For the final test, we've gone off-road.
Driving in the dirt, this Nissan gives me a lot of confidence. It makes mincemeat of the nice, dry surface, and when it comes to the stickier mud, it seems to be very nimble. Do you know what? I think it's so good that it can even get up that. Keep going, keep going, lovely. Go on, go on, go on, go on, go on. And over the top. Yoo-hoo! Woohoo! Well done.
I'm not so sure about taking our little GTI off-road, but it's a 4x4. Wherever Vicky's gone, I've got to go as well. It certainly seems quite capable along these bumpy forest tracks. There's no real clever differentials in this, but it is permanent four-wheel drive. 50-50 split, so it should get most places. But can the RAV follow the X-Trail up the hill? We're stuck. So the Toyota may be nimbler on the road, but it can't match the off-road abilities of the Nissan.
Nor can it quite beat the X-Trail's speed and space and the versatility of its four-wheel drive system.
So, all things considered, the Nissan X-Trail is the best family 4x4.
Next week, we're trying to break a car jump world record. See you then. This week, Tom and I go to Italy to test the new Maserati Quattroporte. But first, here's Tiff.
Tonight on Fifth Gear, we're looking at a human endeavour that's highly dangerous, yet strangely compulsive. The daredevil world of car jumps. People seem to have an irresistible urge to get into a car and launch themselves into the air for as far as possible. It is a dangerous business. Over the years, around 20 people have been killed trying to break the world record for jumping in a car.
But Australian Ray Bauman survived. In 1998, he flew 237 feet in his Chrysler Valiant, breaking the longest car jump record and his back. Most people who jump cars learn the hard way by trial and error. But tonight, we'll be showing what happens when you bring in a bit of science. Science which we'll be putting to the ultimate life or death test in our own attempt to break a car jump world record.
Join us later to find out what happens.
Some things are just too good to miss. Earlier this year, Vicky and I were invited to Florence for the launch of the new £70,000 Maserati Quattroporte.
It's a four-door saloon, which, according to company boss Luca de Montezemolo, is not just one car, but two. A luxury limo for the week and a sports car for the weekend. Sounds interesting.
So, Victoria, darling, what do we actually think to the looks of the thing?
I think it is beautiful, really stunning, classy, just lovely.
I'm agreeing with you totally here. Makes you wonder where all the other big executives lost their passion and why we all just went, yeah, all right then. I mean, when it comes up behind you on the motorway, this great big sucking chrome mouth just comes bearing down on you. It makes you flinch and want to move out of the way.
Absolutely. I really like these little details here, these triple vents and the lovely alloy wheels. And I don't know whether you've seen this, but it's the most beautiful rear door I've ever seen. It's just so beautifully designed.
No, come back here. I've got something else to show you. I mean, the rump's probably not its best angle because those lights are a bit heavy-handed, but
yeah.
It's got the Maserati quad tailpipes, a real trademark, really powerful thing. And actually, having Maserati on your boot lid is actually quite cool.
So we both think that the Quattroporte is truly gorgeous, but it's going to have to be more than just pretty if it's going to really compete with established limos from the likes of BMW, Mercedes and Jaguar. Inside, the Quattroporte feels like a proper old Italian sports car. It's got that leather smell that you catch in your nostrils, and this beautiful deep wood just looks ace. And refreshingly, all the buttons do one thing and one thing only. If I want to switch the traction control off, I simply press one button. If I want to change the lights on this beautiful blue and silver instrument set, I press one button. It's so much better than BMW's iDrive system, and I nearly crash the car every time I'm fiddling with that. This, it's much more simple and the better for it. So in the front, it's a refreshingly nice place to spend time. What's it like in the back, Victoria?
It's very leathery back here with two wide beam chairs that you can snuggle into, which adjust for extra comfort. Pull down the armrest and you not only get two cup holders, but also you get control of the front passenger seat, which you can slide forward if you need a bit more legroom. And then it becomes as spacious as an Audi A8 or a BMW 7 Series.
But as comfortable as it is, the bare stats are still pretty darn impressive. This car has got a Ferrari 400 brake horsepower V8 under the bonnet. It means it'll hit 171 miles an hour and do 0 to 60 in just over 5 seconds. Thing is, there's a couple of things that really get on my nerves, and this 6-speed sequential manual is one of them. Ugh. It's called Duo Select, and it's supposed to be tuned to operate in automatic really smoothly. But the trouble is, unlike a normal automatic transmission that has a torque converter that can kind of stretch the moment between gears so that it's very, very comfortable, this is still a manual. It has to let go of the clutch and re-engage it. It means there's great gasping pauses between gear changes, and it's just not smooth for anybody concerned. Not very good for a limo that's going to be driven like this 90% of the time.
The ride isn't impressive either. The Skyhook suspension doesn't give the velvety ride that it should, and heaven forbid I would spill my gin and tonic.
quite frankly, folks, the Quattroporte doesn't seem to work as a weekday limo. It's time to get out of town and see if it's much cop as a sports car.
Which is exactly what we did.
Well, actually, that's what I did. Once I booted young Tom out of the hot seat and into a cold one.
Sport mode, turn the traction control off and the car immediately sharpens up. The steering becomes smooth and you can really begin to stretch the legs of that yummy V8 engine. In manual mode, the gear changes are now fast and smooth, but I would love a gear stick and a clutch instead of these paddles. I would also like beefier brakes because this car may be fast, but it's also very heavy.
That said, the Quattroporte certainly feels more competent out of the urban sprawl than in it. So much so that it would be rude for me not to play with it a little while longer.
Whenever you're ready, Vicky. Whenever you're ready.
Sorry, Tom.
Oh, she came back then. Anyway, Maserati Quattroporte, what do we actually think of it? Well, I've driven it through town, and the gearbox and the suspension, it just doesn't work. Victoria, what's it like out there in the wilds?
Well, it works much better as a sports car, but it is still almost a 2-ton piece of machinery.
Well, does it have the twin souls that Maserati's talking about?
No, because it doesn't work fully as a limousine and it doesn't work fully as a sports car.
So do you still want one?
With those looks, yes.
We're looking at car jumps, the art of making a car fly through the air. Doing a successful leap is partly down to trial and error, but there is also science involved, although sometimes you wouldn't believe it. So, to demonstrate that science, I'm going to do a few jumps of my own. Nothing too grand, just a typical movie stunt. I've got an old Ford Mondeo, I've got the ramps, and I've got a doctor of mathematics to do the sums for me. It's a bit complex to me. Mark, what are the most important things about the science of car jumps?
Well, there are two most important factors, the takeoff speed. The faster you go, the farther you'll travel.
Yeah, understand that.
And the ramp angle. The higher the ramp angle, up to 45 degrees, the further the car will go. And at 45 degrees, the car will go the maximum distance.
Well, that's it then. So I just go flat out, 45 degrees, and that's as far as I'll get.
Well, it's not quite as simple as that, unfortunately. When a car hits a ramp of 45 degrees, there's going to be tremendous compression on the suspension. And in practice, it's much better to have a smaller angle, in which case, to travel the same distance, you need to go a lot faster.
Right, so flatten it out a bit, go faster. That's it then.
Well, unfortunately, it's still not all there is to it. We need to include air resistance in any calculation of this type. When a large body travels through the air, there's going to be a big drag factor, and so we need a much more complicated equation to model the system and to calculate how far the car will go.
OK, well, I won't get to that because you've lost me now, but we know that my ramp angle is 11 degrees. I need to jump 7 metres, so all I want to know is how fast do I have to go?
Well, we can do that. We can solve this equation numerically on a computer, and if we do that, we find that you'll need to travel at about 32 miles an hour.
32 miles an hour. That's it. Forget all that. 32 miles. Thank you very much. Second gear. 32 miles an hour. Now, I know I liked maths at school, but I never quite wanted to have to believe in maths as much as this. And I'm not so sure he's right at all. Yeah, I can't get anything. Oh, shit. Oh. I believe in maths. In fact, I enjoyed it so much, I think I'll do it again. And again! Obviously, don't try this at home, but if you're interested in the maths, you can check out the equations, which are currently on our website. Join us after the break, when we try to break a world record. That's right, we're going to be jumping off this giant ramp and attempting a 160-foot-long jump. Whether we break the record or not, there's sure to be an almighty crash. Welcome back to the daredevil world of car jumping. We've already seen how a bit of science can help you predict how far a car will fly when I tried some basic ramp jumps. Now we want to test that science out in a world record attempt. And to make it even more difficult to calculate what's going to happen, the record we've chosen doesn't just involve jumping a car. No, that would be far too easy. We're going to attempt our jump towing this. Yes, we're going to try and beat the world record for jumping a car while towing a caravan. One set by our old Australian friend Ray Bauman at 157 feet and 6 inches. Our BMW 530 may still have plenty of grunt, but we've had to make some serious safety modifications. To start with, it's been fitted with a reassuringly thick roll cage and a plate to stop the tow bar spearing the cabin. There's a Macrylon windscreen and a stunt-prepared petrol tank and battery. But what about our 1979 Thompson Glen Caravan? Well, due to strict world record regulations, it has to remain pretty standard. All we've done is fit some new tyres and a stabiliser bar. Now, the main difference between towing a caravan and doing the jump with the car on its own is the increase in wind resistance. This BMW has a drag coefficient of 0.31, but the caravan behind it acts like a parachute, dragging it back and almost doubling that figure to about 0.6. Then there's the danger of the caravan kicking the rear of the car upwards as it leaves the ramp, causing the front to jackknife down and possibly somersault forwards. So the exact landing position is very difficult to predict. Which is why, for the caravan towing record, the landing site is made up of a huge car park of scrapped cars. And to make sure it's soft enough, there are 2 layers of them, sitting on a bed of 200 tyres. To launch the car and caravan, we need a massive ramp, and movie stunt specialists, Bickers Action, spent 2 days constructing one. Weighing 24 tonnes, it's 80 feet long, sits at an angle of 11 degrees, and has a takeoff height of 16 feet. But what speed do we need to drive up it at to break the record? Time for an expert opinion from our mathematician. So, Mark, I guess adding a caravan makes things a little bit more complicated.
Yes, it makes them a lot more complicated. When the air travels past the car with the caravan behind it, it's going to leave a large turbulent wake. And to quantify that drag, we really need to solve the full equations of fluid motion using a large computer simulation.
Which we haven't quite got time for today, so can you give us a rough guide as to what speed we'll need?
Yes, we can get a rough guide by solving the previous equation and just estimating the air resistance. And by doing that, I'd say that to be sure of breaking the record, we probably need to be doing about 85 miles an hour.
85 miles an hour. Nobody thought it would have to be that fast. What's more, there's now a strong crosswind to contend with, so the landing pad has been extended. It's now over 100 feet long and 32 feet wide. Plus, it's fortunate that we have an experienced driver to help us break the record. No, not me, but stuntman Derek Lee.
Hello, Tiff.
Derek, hi. You've done all sorts of stuff for Bond films, Mission Impossible, but you've never done anything quite like this before.
No, this is a little bit new to me. I've crashed cars, been set on fire. I've done one little ramp to ramp, but nothing on this scale.
So how do you feel right now?
I've been through this about 1,000 times in my mind, and I always knew that the time will come when I'm standing on the runway ready to go. So push comes to shove, as they say.
But our mathematician, although he can't work it out precisely because this caravan is a very unpredictable thing, thinks he can have to do about 85 miles an hour to make the record.
I know. I wasn't expecting to have to do that sort of speed, to tell you the truth. I might meet him halfway and do 80 because we did a couple of speed tests yesterday and it was struggling at 85. And I need the precision. That's the most important thing as I go off the ramp.
When you hit that ramp, it's going to take speed out of the car as you hit the ramp as well.
I'm quietly confident.
But then you cover yourself with all sorts of neck braces, knee supports and...
Crash helmet, elbows, box to protect the
bits.
The most essential
And what are you going to do when it takes off? You shut your eyes or what?
I'm going to try and enjoy the ride. But I might shut my eyes.
Do you take your hands off the steering
Yeah,
wheel?
I'll take my hands off the steering wheel, just brace up, because once she's airborne, there's nothing I can do, really. So I just brace myself and I try and keep an eye out for that little line we've got on the cars, which is the record.
Looks a long way away from here.
Oh, it does.
So, I'll leave you to get prepared.
Thank
Good luck.
you. Cheers.
While Derek psyched himself up, it was time for those ever-crucial last-minute preparations. Ambulances, fire crews, and an official judge from Guinness World Records all moved into their positions. With everyone ready, it was time for Derek to perform 2 high-speed practice runs. Once in line, there was no going back.
That is ready to go. Okay, so we're already down here, so in your own time, action, this is a take.
Are you all right, Dale? Well done. Well done. Cleared it easy. Derek. Well done.
That was absolutely mental.
It flew beautifully there.
I knew it was on the right flight line.
Look, you're a world record holder, boy. You're a world record holder. We've beaten the Aussies at rugby, now we've beaten them at car jumping as well. How was the impact?
Oh, it was soft. The adrenaline was going so much, I ripped the gear knob off in my hand. And I thought, do I bolt? No, sorry, it's too late now, I ain't going to do that again.
Did you expect the forward roll, or was that a bit of a shock?
I knew, because I had the right flight line, I couldn't see. I thought, well, when am I going to land and where am I going to land? And then it just all...
Oh, you couldn't see anything in the air?
No, I was like that.
So we'd broken the world record, but by how much? Guinness World Records stipulate that it's where the front wheels of the car land. And after a careful measurement, they calculated that we'd landed 30 feet and 2 inches further on.
Right, that makes it 187 foot, 8 inches. Congratulations.
Thank you. I was thought we'd have been prepared.
Yeah.
You did it all just for that, to hang on your wall.
Oh, that's superb.
I think that's what you call an understatement.
Next week, we're driving Peugeot's rather radical-looking new 407. And we're looking at the exclusive world of celebrity-owned cars. There's Eric Morecambe's Shadow,
George Harrison's Ferrari, and Jamiroquai frontman JK will be showing us around his remarkable car collection.
Here is my first ever car.
Ah, and it's still in one piece.
1602 BMW. Heaviest. This is the short one, which has just been resprayed. It was from a dark, very dark grey, so it's right, but everything's hydraulic on the car.
Sorry, bud. Sorry, bud. Sorry, security.
In this week's Fifth Gear, the radical-looking new Peugeot 407, the best-selling vans in Britain head-to-head round our Anglesey track, and the exclusive world of cars owned by celebrities.
Now, you can't make a programme about celebrity cars without visiting JK. Global success with his band Jamiroquai has netted Jay an estimated £40 million, of which we reckon £2 million has been skillfully invested in cars.
His encyclopedic knowledge of motors has resulted in a real connoisseur's collection. But this would come later. Our day out began with a few toys.
Pull backwards, right? Pull backwards on it now. You're making love to it.
Jay heads to the shops on his Segway. Tiff heads straight into a pricey classic.
Stop it before you hit the black Merc. If you could.
After a bit of rock in the back of a Rolls, we decided to see exactly how fast this famous person was. So it was into the back garden and Jay's purpose-built go-kart track. The buggies in question are Jay's latest acquisition, Amos Kennedy AK40s, £6,400, 24 horsepower, and 3 serious competitors.
Well, here we are, Chillington Circuit. It's tough at the top, even for the best. And here he is, Tiff Needell. Tiff, you've been around the track already once today. Any corners that are worrying you?
There's a nasty dip at the bottom there. Well, I feel it's a long race, endurance, so I'm going to look after my tyres. Fitness is going to play a key part, I think, in this event.
Any of the other drivers worrying you?
There's some double-barrelled someone up the front there, and the bloke who owns the place apparently is a bit aggressive and won't let you overtake. But we'll see.
Bit aggressive. Well, let's move along the grid. We're coming over to someone with a double-barrelled name. It's Vicky Butler-Henderson. Now, you've beaten me before at Bedford Autodrome, haven't you?
Yes, I have, and thoroughly enjoyed the experience. I'm hoping to do the same again.
I didn't really enjoy it that much. Why did you enjoy it so much?
Because you have such a huge ego. It was back into P2, boy.
Well, there you go, Danger Woman herself. So, let's let the race begin.
In the white helmet, me. Wearing the blue helmet, our gracious host for the day, Mr. JK. And in the outspan, the Sultan of Slide, Mr. Tiff Needell. I had a flying start, but it was the boys who set the early pace. Jay is genuinely a tasty driver, but Tiff forgot to heed his own advice. And got caught out by the hidden dip. I caught up for a bit of a dice, but in the end, Jay's local knowledge and unbridled enthusiasm won the day. And it took an engine clogged with grass to prise him out of the cart and back to the house. Join us in a moment for an exclusive look around his mouth-watering car collection.
We used to be a nation of Mondeo men and buy family saloons in droves, but now we don't. Sales of Vectras, Lagunas and the like are in free fall. People prefer prestige and niche machinery, like 4x4s and MPVs. Peugeot have decided to fight back with design. This is their new 407, the replacement for their well-respected but slow-selling 406. And hasn't it got a gob on it? This new knows, but this new Peugeot is one of the cars that meets the 2005 pedestrian safety regulations, which means it's actually much nicer to the people you potentially clobber. Obviously, this doesn't mean that you can bum about mowing down the bus queue, but it might just save someone's life by being a slightly softer place to land should the worst happen, which is a great safety feature, but makes the front bigger than it should be. And you can really see where Peugeot's used this extra space to create this big energy-absorbing crash structure at the front. The engine actually starts about here, a good foot from the front bumper. The suspension mountings are all a long way back, keeping the hard points out of the way of a pedestrian. Even better, see this front bumper? Really soft. And the bonnet,
there's nothing behind it, so if you bang your head on it, you're not going to smash it off the engine block. If you want to get hit by a car, then this is the one you got to get hit by. Well, inside we've got a whole new interior, which is much, much better than the old car. The first thing you'll notice is this huge set-back dash. It feels like a very low MPV, but coupled to that really long nose, it makes a bit of a mare to park because you can't see where the ends of the car are. This central console, it looks quite clean, but look at all those buttons. It just drives you mad trying to work out what things do. The dials are nice though, big comfy chairs like sitting on a one-person sofa. But the thing is, it's just not making me excited. I wonder if it's any better out on the open road. We'll get a wide choice of 4-cylinder petrols and turbo diesels from 1.6 to 2.2 litres. There will also be the traditional 3-litre V6 variant, of which they will sell almost 2 to Peugeot dealers. We're in the 160 brake horsepower 2.2 litre petrol, which still manages to sound uncannily like a diesel. Weird that. It should be fast, except the 407 range as a whole weighs nearly the same as Berkshire. None of them, apart from the V6, can crack 10 seconds to 62 miles an hour, which is fat bloke slow in anyone's language. Now, Peugeot have always known a thing or two about making a car ride and handle. They make all their dampers in-house for a start, which must make it easier. And this one, well, it's just okay. I mean, it resists understeer pretty well, you know, it's good at doing that, and it'll even tighten the line slightly if you lift off sharply halfway round a corner. And as to the ride, well, it won't make a meal of anything less than a sleeping policeman. But, to be honest, I'm still just bored. Truth is, the place this car really impresses is on the motorway, where a great straight-line ride and lack of noise make it a winner. Even the steering and brakes are set up for A roads and motorways like these. I mean, they're very smooth and very progressive, but it ends up just being nice. This is not the car to take over the world in, because nice, and competent though it is, does not a hero make. So, the Peugeot 407. It's a very competent car, but it's never going to rewrite the sales charts. It just hasn't got enough to tempt people out of their downsized prestige brands and their niche models. In fact, reading all the stuff about it, I think I'd rather be hit by one than to be seen driving one.
We're looking around JK's multi-million-pound car collection, and we start with the small matter of a 250 grand Rolls Phantom, fresh from a foray into France.
What's his cruising speed then?
Well, it's about 120, it sits nicely.
Was it totally quiet 120 then? Just...
Absolutely silent, yeah. Fantastic thing. The old one is Chanel's old car, Coco's old car.
Mercedes, yeah.
Everything's hydraulic on the car.
No.
So nothing actually makes any noise. There's no electric. Also, the rear seats are on back and forth hydraulically. That's it. I've got another one which is 4 doors, 6 windows. So all 6 windows come down with a rear sunroof, which is actually for sale at the moment.
What's the history with this one? How did you...
I came about this from a specialist who deals in these. I mean, if you don't get the right one, you could play 150 grand into one. I mean, to give you an idea, one of these small hydraulic door catchers here comes to £1,500, sir, to you.
For that?
The heater switch inside for the air conditioning is 7,000.
Do you use it much then, Jay? How often do you drive something like this?
I use this as my sort of town smoker. I just like it. It's got that kind of mafia staff car feel about it, you know?
Which couldn't be said about the little Fiat he calls Noddy.
Who's built this? A proper bath?
There's a chap down the road, actually, who specialises in these. And I went down there one day.
Oh, so sweet.
It's just 1,000cc. I'm not exactly sure what the horsepower is. I think it's something like 90 or something. 90 or 100. But it goes like the clappers. I mean, it's an alternative to a Mini Cooper.
Yeah.
Really. This Maserati is one of...
super rare.
One of 2 2-litre Mazdas designed by Frua, who did some other stuff later, which wasn't as pretty as that. But yeah, I absolutely love it. I've always liked these, and I was just lucky to come across it, really.
Just absolutely beautiful.
What's hiding, though?
Hiding is one of the finest Ferraris of all time. 550 Maranello. I love this. This is great. Manual, beautiful handling.
Yeah, talking of Ferraris, where's the Enzo here? Haven't seen the Enzo?
Oh, yeah.
Is that here?
The Enzo isn't here. It needed new rear tyres. to be honest.
Good boy.
Good,
Lovely.
well done.
Need new rear tyres.
Have you got a normal car as well? What's the day car?
I've got the day car. It's the only one in the world, purple Audi RS6.
From an Audi estate to a Mercedes 300 SL Roadster.
Alloy block model, one of the last 29.
Jay's favourite feature is the simple and elegant hood mechanism, and he reckons that despite the car's age, it still keeps up with modern traffic. It rubs shoulders with a Bentley S1 Continental Park Ward drop head. The car, he says, he takes the vicar out to tea in.
Here is my first ever car.
Ah, is it the actual car? Or
It is
just
the actual car.
The actual car.
56,990 miles.
Had you sold it then? You have to get it back again?
I'd sold it to somebody else in the band, and then it went to somebody else in the band, and then it finally came back to me.
So are you shopped out, or have you got something that you want to...
No, it's all over. The dream's over. I don't know. I've got everything I want, you know? I mean, there's always other stuff, but then it's where to put it. It's a consuming passion. It's all consuming, you know. It's just... but they're lovely things, and they've got to be looked after for future generations. You know, 1958, this is way older than me. It's 11 years older than I am. So.
That respect for cars even reaches the studio. As a tribute to his beloved Enzo, he's written Black Devil Car and has let you, the Fifth Gear faithful, hear it first.
She had the greenest eyes, and with those endless thighs, I put my hands to some misdemeanors. Can't you see me? I'm not a chooser. You drive a black machine, and I think you're groovy. Why don't you let me take a little ride with you, baby? Yeah. Riding around, and I my car.
Thank you very much for coming down, Fifth Gear. Thank you to Le Mans veteran, Tiffany Dell, and Super Minx, Mickey Button Henderson, and goodbye from me. Goodbye.
After the break, we'll be asking whether a celebrity-owned car is worth more and revealing the mystery celeb owner of this Honda S2000. Tonight on Fifth Gear, we're looking at celebrity cars. We live in a celebrity-obsessed age. So if your car was once owned by someone famous, is it worth more than one that wasn't? It certainly can be. This 1969 Ferrari 365 was once owned by George Harrison. It recently fetched £80,000 at auction. A car without the famous owner would only have achieved about £60,000. Not a bad markup. But if that owner had been John Lennon, and the car a psychedelic Rolls-Royce Phantom, the margin would be even greater. That bit of Beatles memorabilia made 1.6 million at auction. Without the connections, it would only have made 50 grand.
Bring me sunshine.
And it's not just global legends that have the Midas touch. This is a 1974 Silver Shadow, normally about 6 grand's worth. But those initials on the number plate stand for Eric Morecambe, and that changes everything. To find out why, we spoke to the man who auctioned it, Fifth Gear's classic car expert, Chris Routledge.
The 1970s is a very fashionable time in the classic car world at the moment, and there can be no more fashionable a car than a chocolate brown Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. If you combine that with the fact that it was driven from new by one of the great icons of the 1970s, Eric Morecambe, you get a very valuable celebrity car.
As a result, Lionel Snowdon bid £31,000 for it, and now uses it to take fellow devotees on special Morecambe tours. So when you're driving along at night, do you feel a presence of the great man himself in the passenger seat?
Very much so, yeah. I do feel as though he is here. You know, being a mega fan, you know, you sort of drive along with his 8 tracks playing, his music. Yes, you just feel as though he's along with you, yeah.
When this car was recently sold, it was being sold by the Morecambe family itself, and that is very important.
The direct celebrity connection does seem to make a difference. When Elton John came to sell his car collection in 2001, there were plenty of bidders. The star of the show was his Jaguar XJ220, about 150 grand's worth. But it went for 60 grand more than that.
934.
However, when it came to be sold on again, and Sir Elton was no longer the last owner, the value dipped. There's a surprisingly large number of celebrity-owned cars about. You can find them at dealers, auctions and used car websites. On this one, simply type in the word celebrity and it will come up with a list of motors that claim a starry past. But be warned, don't think every celebrity car is worth more.
In most cases, celebrity ownership will make a car easier to sell, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be any more valuable.
But if you misjudge the desirability of the celeb connection, you can lose all round. This is one of John Prescott's famous Jags, but would you pay over the odds for it?
You got another silly question?
Quite. Even with JP's name on the V5, it failed to meet its reserve at auction, and the current owner tells me he's open to offers.
So there's proof. Get your celeb car right and it can be a nice little earner. Get it wrong and it can be a bit of a nightmare.
But we think we found a car you're sure to like as the prize in our latest fifth gear competition. One of Britain's most charismatic TV personalities is currently driving one of the best sports cars around, the Honda S2000, and it could be yours. We'll reveal who the mystery celeb is after this.
Now for the bit of the show where we find out what's quickest, the fifth gear shootout. So far we've seen BMW Z4 squeeze past Porsche's Boxster, Nissan's 350Z trounce Audi's most powerful TT, and Citroen's new C2 GT beat Ford's Sport Car. Next week we'll discover whether Lotus's latest Elise can beat Vauxhall's pace-setting VX220 Turbo. But before that, this. The ultimate shootout between Britain's two most popular vans. In the red corner, Ford's Transit T280 with its 120 horsepower turbo diesel. 3 seats and lots of knobs. And in the silver corner, at £17,700, 2.5 grand more than the Ford, the Mercedes Sprinter 213 CDI. It has a 125 horsepower turbo diesel engine, 3 seats and lots of knobs. First up, the Transit.
And I'm on a racetrack in a Transit van. And I have to confess I'm a bit of a Transit man because when I used to race my little Formula Ford racing car, I used to tow it the length and breadth of Britain and even sleep in it most times. So I love them, but I did want a rear-wheel drive one, and these new front-wheel drive Fango Dangos aren't quite what I expected. But I have to say it's performing very well. Now, as you'd expect, there's plenty of understeer, but it's actually not that bad. And it pretty much follows the line I want. And this little frisky engine rams really happily up to 4,500. It certainly seems to pull well. We're up to the radar complex. Wheel it left. Oh, gee. Let's fire it right. Go for a bit more. Whoa, understeer. Whoa, grass. You're not supposed to take shortcuts. I'll be a bit neater on the time lap, I think, but that was a bit too much understeer. All right, let's get a lap in the book.
It reaches the hairpin checkpoint in 41.9 seconds and sets a target lap of 61.9.
And so to the Mercedes Sprinter. Now I've got my rear-wheel drive and I've got an extra 5 horsepower. But I've also got an extra 300 kilos and enough ASR and ESP to prevent me having any fun at all. Stay just on full throttle here, and I can just get to this corner, go down, if I'm still on full throttle, turn in, still on full throttle. And it just stops. Oh well, I guess it's safe, but I don't think it's very sprinty. Still, a time lap is what we're here to do. That's what it's all about. Can the Sprinter out-sprint a Transit?
With the ESP taking off the throttle and jamming on the brakes, the Sprinter is 2.2 seconds behind at the first checkpoint, and by the hairpin, it's a yawning 3.6 seconds slower. It's beginning to look like the difference between first and second-class post, with the Mercedes finishing the 1.1-mile lap a full 5.3 seconds after the Ford. So, if you're making a 300-mile racetrack delivery, you could make it 24 minutes faster in a Transit.
So far, our look at celebrity-owned cars has ranged from Eric Morecambe's Roller to John Prescott's Jag, and all that remains is to reveal the celebrity owner of this Honda S2000.
Now we thought long and hard about the celebrity car combo you'd most be interested in. We considered David Beckham's BMW M3. We even toyed with the idea of Robert De Niro's Porsche. But we thought the car you'd like most was once used by this girl.
Only me and the Honda S2000 I've been ragging around in lately. We've been inseparable. It's taken me everywhere. Lunch at swanky places, five-star hotels, movie premieres, film days, health spas, everywhere. Which, should the mood take you, really keeps you on your toes.
In this week's Fifth Gear, Tiff will be pitching the new Toyota-engined Lotus Elise against the Vauxhall VX220 Turbo in our latest shootout. And Adrian will be trying out internet auctions, the latest way to buy and sell used cars.
And we'll also be road testing a motor show, a British motor show.
It now happens every other year at the NEC near Birmingham, and last time, in 2002, 450,000 of you turned up, making it, the organisers claim, Britain's most popular consumer exhibition.
Even so, it was a pale shadow of what it used to be. Attendance was down 250,000 on 1998, and the numbers were only part of the story.
When it comes to launching new models and flashy concept cars, manufacturers now prefer the likes of Paris, Geneva and Frankfurt, not the West Midlands.
And without those headline-grabbing exclusives, the British show has slowly been slipping off centre stage.
So the organisers are fighting back. As well as some flashy stands, they're promising more live events, more interaction. And now it's in the spring rather than the autumn, some better weather to enjoy everything. They say it all adds up to a new motor show, which is why they're calling it Motor Show Live, and it's on until June the 6th.
But is it enough to make a visit worthwhile? With a family of 4 having to fork out 50 quid just to walk through the door, will they get value for money? Join us later in the show to find out.
Ah, summer days in Blighty. Tropical blue seas, the scorching heat of the sun's rays, and gorgeous women scantily clad in bikinis.
And I'm here at the seaside. And like any good holidaymaker, I bought my bucket and spade, a stick of rock, big bag of balls, money for chips, and a new Beetle cabriolet.
VW launched this car about a year ago, and they've shifted nearly 5,500 of them. Not bad, considering prices start at 16 grand, and it's nearly 18,000 for this 2 litre. Seems folk are still prepared to pay a premium to be ruthless.
And all you have to do to get rid of this big old canvas hood and enjoy the British summertime, which incidentally is getting slightly better, is flick a switch and pull a handle, just like Audi's TT Roadster.
Yes, it's as quick as that. Brilliant.
But no matter how good it looks with the roof down, you can see where the compromises have been made. Take a look at that boot. You'd be struggling to get even the smallest bits of beach kit in there for anybody. As for this folded roof, well, it completely fills your rear view mirror. And these back seats, you'd have to be literally legless to get anybody in them. Thing is, the whole car's so unutterably girly. You feel like it should come with a makeup bag and extra big mirrors so you can get your lippy on properly.
it's not exactly like it's much fun to drive as well. Even this top-of-the-range 2-litre 115 brake unit is really, really boring to listen to. And as for the handling, well, it's all pure golf, because that's what it is underneath. Thing is, this is a car with a vase, so take the hint. Much better suited to being a boulevardier on the promenade than chucking around bends.
Ah, that's better.
But there are still niggles. You see this long dashboard? Well, it means you can't see the front of the car, and it makes it really, really hard to park. And as for your rear view mirror, well, it's totally full of that folded hood. Who cares, though? Smiles and waves spontaneously surround this car. You've suddenly been transformed into a tree-hugging, baby-kissing, cuddly-wuddly bear of a person. Men want to be you, women want to sleep with you. It's like driving around in a giant fruity bathtub.
Cruising Skegness for the afternoon, I could have made hundreds of new chums, but my girlfriend would have been jealous. And you can never forget that when it comes to the driving experience, this car really is rather at sea.
So, the Beetle Cabriolet. Well, it is a flawed gem. It's got great looks and bags of personality, but as a long-term relationship, I'm not sure I could commit.
Welcome to the Fifth Gear Shootout. This week, the latest Lotus Elise takes on Vauxhall's VX220 Turbo, which, built of course by Lotus, has a 200 horsepower turbo engine that gives this £26,000 sports car supercar-like pace. Lotus's new 111R comes with a 189 bhp engine and 6-speed gearbox, both courtesy of Toyota, plus a few extra little tweaks. At £28,000, plus new options such as air conditioning and lecky windows, it's at least a couple of grand dearer than the VX220. But what we want to know is it faster? The Vauxhall VX220 Turbo, which, until today, I had never driven. But it's easy to see why everyone's been raving about it. Because that 2-litre turbocharged power plant gives this chassis exactly what it's always wanted, and for an affordable price. And it's an engine you'd hardly know was turbocharged. There's no hint of a turbo. The power delivery seems to be almost seamless. Of course, this Lotus chassis is already well-renowned as one of the best, if not the best, on the roads today. But then, even the best chassis has its limitations. And when you really push this Vauxhall, there is a little bit too much understeer turning in, which will inevitably snap into oversteer on the way out. Right, enough of the showboating. Let's get a quick, neat lap time. It hits the first checkpoint in 23.11 seconds. The hairpin in 35.35. And goes on to set a target lap of 51.96 seconds. So, Lotus have finally given the Lotus the power to fight back. And although on paper it's still 10 horsepower down on the Vauxhall's engine, the Toyota power plant and 6-speed gearbox helped to reduce the weight by some 70 kilos. So the Lotus has actually got a better power-to-weight ratio. This is going to be close. Mind you, you only get that power over 6,200 RPM, because this Toyota engine has one of those wonderful variable valve timing. It actually produces a power delivery that's more like the old turbo surge was than a turbo is nowadays. Nothing below 6.2 then. The noise chimes in, and you get extra power by the bucket load. Now, straight away, I'm noticing that this Lotus also turns into the corners a lot better and doesn't swap to oversteer so much in the middle of them. The Lotus engineers have been tweaking this chassis, making the rear subframe stiffer, playing with the springs and dampers. I love this car. But is it quicker than the Vauxhall? Shock of shocks, the extra torque of the VX220 has dragged it to the top of the hill 7/100ths faster than the Lotus. But by the hairpin, that deficit has been reduced to just 3/100ths, with the most technical sector yet to come. Just a flick of opposite lock and the Lotus has reversed the deficit as it hits the finish line to win the day by the slenderest of margins. Who's a clever boy, then? Welcome back to our road test of the British Motor Show, or Motor Show Live, as it's now called.
As we said earlier, manufacturers rarely choose to launch new cars at the British Motor Show, and you have to look fairly hard to find anything that's not been seen somewhere before.
But one new shape which was unveiled was Noble's new upmarket M14. 400 horsepower and the promise of 0 to 60 in 4.3 seconds with a top speed of 190 miles an hour. All yours for 75 grand.
One of the few British cars that might actually prove to be faster is this, the TVR Sagaris. It costs £50,000 and it's for the sort of person who thinks that other TVRs are slow.
There's also Porsche's new 911 Turbo S, a new Roadster from Morgan. And Chrysler have brought along their convertible Crossfire. At the other end of the scale, there's a trick new Tigra from Vauxhall, and Renault's unveiled this, a sort of tall Clio that's big on space, the Modus.
There are no Alfa Romeo or BMW stands. They've decided it wasn't worth turning up. And the only model Mercedes stand is the £315,000 McLaren-built SLR.
It's also a chance to dribble over Ferrari's Scaglietti, Maserati's MC12, Aston Martin's DB9 Volante, and who could resist this?
It's gorgeous, isn't it? Not this, that.
Ford's GT.
From what we've seen, the show isn't brimming with world premieres, but there's still plenty to get excited about. Join us after the break, where we'll be checking out its live action events, and Adrian will be assessing the world of internet auctions.
For all of us, there comes a time in life when we hanker after a new set of wheels. It's been a good year. Time to trade up. Now, I fancy chopping in my trusty old Beamer 3 Series, and I've got 15 grand to spend on a newer and better car. Now, I'm not talking about new metal. I'll let someone else take the initial hit of depreciation, thank you very much. Now, I'm thinking more interesting, second-hand, Merc, Audi, even a Lotus. Now, traditionally, buying and selling used cars is a rather labour-intensive process. Lots of trekking around the dealers and wading through the small lads. But now there's something that lets you trade up from the comfort of your own living room. Welcome to the world of internet auctions. With the likes of eBid, QXL and eBay to choose from, there are now quite a few auction websites around. But when I was looking, eBid and QXL only seemed to have small numbers of cars on them. eBay, however, had nearly 7,000. So guess where I'm going to try? So how does it work? Well, the first thing I've got to do is register. Then it's simply a case of looking for the car I want. But there are plenty of ways to save yourself time and hassle. One trick is to look for the cars that have plenty of pictures and detail. That means more opportunity to see what you're getting and an increased chance the seller has nothing to hide. And one important thing to check is that the seller has what they call a good feedback rating. The great thing about auction websites is they allow you to see the seller's track record, whether people are happy with what they've bought from them and how they've been handled, which is something you can't see in the small ads or even at the main dealers. For example, this chap has sold 13 different items and has 100% positive feedback. However, be cautious if you come across this icon. It means the seller has changed their ID recently, which could mean they're covering something up. Now, the bidding process is fairly simple, but before I let my itchy finger get the better of me, I've got to remember that this is an auction, and that means I'm bidding to buy. So, provided it's as described, I'm legally committed to pay. Frankly, I was disappointed by the choice of Audi TTs, Merc SLKs and Lotuses. they weren't very good deals, so I cast my net wider and looked at Merc C-classes. This one had a detailed description and the seller had 100% feedback rating. I reckon it was worth 14 grand, so I put in a bid. Here goes.
Most sellers aren't stupid. They set a minimum sale figure, a reserve, which buyers cannot see. So I'll have to sit back and wait and see how much our man wants, whilst remembering the golden rule at auction. Stick to your limit.
Now I've also got my old Beamer to sell, and I'm going to try and shift that online as well. Time for some digital photography. Now it's important to tell everyone everything, so I'm even noting those little marks on the seats.
I've put down a reasonable starting price, otherwise it takes ages for the price to edge up. And I've also set the reserve, because I'm not keen on losing cash.
So how much does all this cost? Well, charges vary according to the value of the car. For my BMW, it's £7 to place the listing, plus if it sells, there's a final fee of around £15.
So we've got a bid on one car and the others for sale. All we do is sit back, watch the action and answer any emails about the BMW. I think it's time for another cuppa and a bit of a rest. This car dealing really takes it out of you.
Right, back to the C-Class, and for a few hours I was the highest bidder, but then I lost out to someone who was willing to pay over the odds. I tried another C-Class. Again, for a while I was the highest bidder, until I lost it. In the end, I had to widen my search even further, and found this 3-litre Jaguar X-Type. Just 2 years old, loads of kit and one owner. The seller had 100% feedback rating, albeit on only 2 things. Unfortunately, my bid didn't meet the reserve, but I was the only bidder, so it was time for another internet auction trick. I emailed the seller and we agreed on a figure of £14,500.
So here I am just a day later at the owner's house. Now remember, if the car differs in any way to what was stated at auction, the Trade Description Act still applies and I can walk away. But if it's okay, I'm legally obliged to buy it. Hello, I'm here to buy your car.
Nice to meet you. Come in.
First impressions were promising. The perfect paintwork, the level flanks, tidy alloys, and a clean bill of health under the bonnet suggested a straight motor.
OK, I've had a good look round the car and it all seems pretty clean inside now. Everything is intact. And most importantly of all, I've checked that the logbook corresponds with the VIN plate at the front. So, time to take it for a quick road test.
Because I'm from the telly with an honest face, the owner trusted me to take a test drive on my own. It all drove very well, plus it's still got 1 year on the warranty. Now, I'd already arranged with the owner that a banker's draft was okay, and I've also had the car HPI checked for any write-off history or outstanding finance. It's all great news. Meanwhile, how was my old Beamer getting on? I'd wanted 3 grand for it, and although there wasn't much action to begin with, towards the end of the 7-day auction period, there was practically a bidding frenzy, topping out at a very healthy £3,350.
So, is buying and selling a car on internet auction any good? Personally, I've done pretty well. According to this, the industry's little black book, this particular Jag should have cost at least a couple of grand more at a dealer's. Plus, I've managed to get rid of my trusty old 3 Series for a pretty good price. Personally, I've done well out of the experience. OK, I didn't get the car I wanted first off, and there wasn't that comprehensive selection I'd hoped for. But apart from the journey to go and collect this Jag, I've done it all from my own living room.
Welcome back to our road test of the British Motor Show. We've already seen some new cars, but not as many as you'd expect at one of the bigger European shows. But the organisers are hoping the interactive events will really make this show different. So let's start with the Taster Test Drive.
The idea is you select the manufacturer of your choice and then hope there'll be some keys left on these boards. But be warned, the promoters are expecting it to be pretty busy. And when you do get into a car, your Taster Test Drive is less than 1.5 miles long between a lot of cones at a car park. So, even if you're in a Subaru Impreza WRX, you won't get out of second gear.
Then there's the driving school for kids. There's everything you need to learn to drive. There's a theory test, a simulator, a fleet of courses, some driving instructors and a little track. But kids, don't get too excited. You have to be at least 14 years old and 1.5 metres in height to have a go.
If that rules you out, smaller children can join their parents and an experienced driver on the 4x4 course outside. 7 manufacturers are taking part and there's no charge.
You get to go over some little hills. You get to drive up some big hills. But of course, you have to go down again. And you get to go through some water. Oh. Where's the life jacket?
While Tiff's on the 4x4 course, I've come to the live action arena to see the Metropolis show. It costs £30 for a family of 4, and that's on top of the entrance fee, so it had better be worth it.
Metropolis appears to be a good old battle between good and evil, with some tyre-squealing antics, a few stunts and some street dancing. But when I watched one of the final run-throughs, I thought it rather disappointing and would have felt short-changed. The promoters have promised that when the show opens to the public, things will be more action-packed.
But if you'd rather be in the action than watching it, then for an extra tenner, you can go for a passenger ride in a tyre-smoking caterer.
So, what do we think of the show so far? Well, remember, for a family of 4, it's £50 to get in, another £30 for Metropolis, and £10 each for a spin in a Caterham. And there are bound to be huge queues for the taster test drives and the 4x4 course, so it's looking pricey, especially when you realise that entry to other countries' motor shows costs about £6 for an adult, and their attendances are on the up.
But one bit of live action that you can see for free is the mini open-air theatre. You won't get the best seat in the house, which is here sitting right next to Russ Swift, but you will be able to see him and his team throw a handful of new mini convertibles around, including one that jumps.
Another manufacturer who's made a sterling effort is Ford with their huge Tracy Island set, all to do with the latest Thunderbirds movie. The show's live action sequence should keep kids interested for a bit, and it's also free. But personally, I preferred the backstage tour with its movie props and the chance to dress up in my favourite colour.
But beneath all this glitz and glamour, does this new style of show provide you with value for your money? Well, when compared with what the rest of the world gets, the answer still has to be no. But if enough of you turn up this year, then hopefully the promoters will be able to drop those admission prices and provide you with better value for money in 2 years' time.
I'm afraid that's it for this series of Fifth Gear, but we will be back with more great stuff like this in the autumn.